Chat, let's get started. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Dr. Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I am a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. Is this pre-recorded? Maybe if you're watching this in the future, but right now it is live. But at some point it will be pre-recorded. Every moment except for now is going to be pre-recorded, right? Isn't that how it works? All right. So welcome to another stream, y'all. We've got some exciting stuff today. We have, let's see. We have a couple of announcements to make. And then today we're going to be talking about some dating, virginity, porn addiction stuff. Happy February, everybody. And then we also have some stuff about personality and meditation and spirituality. So we're just going to touch on a lot of different stuff. So recently, we've been a little bit busier over here. And so I really have started to miss streaming. I thought that would, everyone's like, oh my God, like, and even I felt that way too, where I was like, oh my God, like this is like too much. And, oh, we're okay, right? Okay. Because sometimes we have a problem with when we switch profiles and it lags, but it looks okay. So I'm really excited to just like do what we used to do, which is we've got some stuff from the internet and we are going to talk about things from the internet. Okay. All right, let's get started. Before we begin, like I mentioned, we've been busy, and it turns out that we crossed 2 million subscribers on YouTube, and someone made a post about it. So I guess, like, you know, we started this out a couple years ago on Twitch, and it was, you know, tiny. There were like 20 people hanging around. And now about 4 years later, we're like, you know, watched by millions of people every month. And so here's a shout out to AOE Healing. And I want to just remind y'all that, like, we can't do this without you, right? So even though it's my face and you're seeing my face on the screen, like, as we're going to discover today, it's not just about Dr. K, it's about everybody else who we're going to be talking to. I feel like I can't recover from my pain. Every Friday in a nutshell. I think I will never have a girlfriend. I think you're wrong, and I'm pretty hopeful for you. Angry face, right? So we're going to be talking about that stuff, but this is the community that y'all built. So, like, we literally could not do this without you. Couple things. The other thing that I want to mention is that, you know, I don't think a lot of people realize, like, what our operation is, but this is like the team. And, you know, like some people have been here, like, so I don't know if you guys know this, but Hannah actually made our original emotes for the Twitch channel. People like Lindsay, Kabir, and Brandon were our original mods on, like, Twitch. And there's just a ton of people that, you know, y'all don't see very much, but we've got a huge team, and they're really the ones that make this happen. I just talk to y'all for like 6 to 8 hours a week, and everything else is absolutely like these people. So yeah, like, so if you guys like, you know, what we put together, you know, Zach is really responsible for, like, helping our content grow. Kabir does a lot too for content and sort of like merging content and community. So really, like, a lot of this stuff is due to not me. And I just kind of wanted to point that out. So we look at this and we're like, oh my God, this is such an accomplishment. Congratulations, Dr. K. And it's like, I didn't make that happen. Like, everybody else made that happen, right? So I can't sign up for something 2 million times and make it happen. That's literally all I can do is offer one sub. So just huge shout out to everybody for making this happen. And I mean that. I'm not just saying that. It's like, really, like, you know, I wake up and I used to teach in front of groups of like 12 to 15 people, and now I just do it in front of a couple 100,000 to a few million. So I haven't changed. The big thing that's changed is the way that this information gets disseminated, the way that even people like, I don't know if you guys saw Jacob, but I mean, Jacob finds me dozens of articles every week so that we can make content that is very, you know, research backed. So like everything that we're putting together, because we've in some ways reached the limit of what I know. So like, you know, I have to do a lot more research. And interestingly enough, we've also like touched barely 10% of what I know because there's a whole lot other stuff. Yeah, so I'm just really grateful to be able to be here. Like, it's fun that this is my job. Like, I'm very excited and like, it's fun, right? So it's a Monday morning at noon where I live, and I get to talk to the internet for 2 hours about dating, virginity, and pornography addiction. Let's go. Yeah, so next thing before we dive in is, so have y'all ever played Dragon's Dogma? We got to talk about gaming for just a hot second, and then we're going to dive into the posts. Like, this game is amazing. Yeah, it's really cool. You're like an anime saga. Speaking of anime sagas, I started watching Blue-Eyed Samurai, and I remember, I think chat recommended it to me, or Lindsay recommended it to me. I don't remember. But so Dragon's Dogma, I think it kind of like skirted by, like it was not a huge game, but it's so good. Oh my God, it's so good. Like, it's hard to describe how they capture like a really good feeling. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on in the industry where half the industry is moving in the wrong direction and half the industry is moving in the right direction. But like some of these games like Dragon's Dogma, I was listening to some like, you know, quote from one of their developers where they were like, are you going to include fast travel? And he's like, no. They're like, but players don't like traveling. And he's like, well, if your game is boring, yeah, then they're not going to like traveling. But Dragon's Dogma is a lot of fun. You get to run around and like random stuff happens and you get ambushed, and it's a lot of fun. Um, okay. Yeah. Yeah, magic feels and looks amazing. That's one of the things I love about it. I usually love playing mages, but they do a really good job of qualitatively capturing magic. Yeah, I tried Red Dead Redemption 2. I just felt like it was doing chores. It's like we're going to do this like in real life where we've got chores to do. And it's like, okay, hold on a second. If I want to do chores, I might as well do chores IRL instead of doing chores on a video game and then have chores left over. But maybe I need to give it another shot. So same thing happened with Dragon's Dogma, where like I played it many years ago and then I like left it alone. I think I played it around the time I started med school or something. And then, you know, I got busy for a decade. Yeah, I played a little bit of Frostpunk. I love Against the Storm, which is inspired by Frostpunk. And then I tried to go back and play Frostpunk, but it was a touch primitive after the evolutions of ATS. Okay. So, has stream just started? Arguably, it has been just starting for a few minutes now. Come to India, Dr. K. I want to. Maybe this year, actually. Let's do it, chat. Dr. K goes to India. Let's go. Okay. Shall we do real things? What do y'all think? Real things? Yes, no? Chat? Okay. Let's take a look. So today what we're gonna do, there we go. So today what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about dating, virginity, pornography, and relationships. Okay, so we've got this kind of stuff. So we've got 4 posts on this. And then we've got, so I'm shamelessly stealing characteristics of people I want to be like. Is it bad? So we're going to talk a little bit about how to develop a personality and identity. And then meditation, bringing up anger and disgust towards my father. So we're going to talk a little bit about meditation. And then why does everyone talk about the egos if they're not the ego that's doing the talking? What a great question. Super cool. Okay, so let's get started. Since I was in my early teens, sex, dating, and relationships were the most important thing for me. However, despite that fact, somehow the years passed me by and I barely had any experiences. All the ones I did have were really negative and hurt me. Now, almost every time the topic comes up in my life, I feel a sort of pulling pain in the middle of my chest that is overwhelming. And oh boy, does it come up regularly. It's in the movies, books, general pop culture, and just pretty much everywhere. My friends talk about the tons of experiences they had. No, they are not lying all the time. I'm 23 and I now feel like nothing I can experience in the future will be able to outweigh the pain that I already experienced. I just can't imagine anything that would justify the mental agony I went through so far, which might seem theatrical to some people, but it is the way that I feel. Maybe I'm just a sensitive person. The disappointment with myself for failing at the thing that has always been the most important to me is sometimes crushing me. I'd say I break down because of it twice per month. I've been in therapy for a year now. Okay, strong work, Hot G23. I mean that. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about what to do if you care about sex, relationships, love, and you have been unable to engage in sex, relationships, love. It can feel like a vicious cycle where you're kind of stuck, or actually not vicious cycle, more like you get trapped, you fall behind, and then you can't ever fix things. So today what we're going to do is break this apart a little bit and hopefully give y'all some way to move forward. So we're going to start by taking some notes, okay? Because there's a lot of things to understand here. So I'm going to start with this concept of something called the Peter Principle. And the Peter Principle is this kind of principle from management that says that everyone rises to the level of their incompetence. Now, this can be kind of confusing, but let's understand this. So let's say I work at a job, and this is job number 1, and I excel at job number 1. Then what happens? I get promoted to the next tier. And then I excel at the next tier. And then I get promoted to the next tier. And now I just do an average job, right? This is equivocal. So I do not excel, at which point I stay over here. So instead of having me occupy a job where I have excellent performance, I'm occupying a place where I have mediocre performance. So this is kind of an interesting observation that they made in the world of business, that basically, like, if you look at a company that has 500 employees, everyone is like operating at a mediocre level because they've been promoted out of their best skill set. Now, y'all may say, what does this have to do with this case? So here's kind of a weird kind of perspective, right? So if you have a problem and you are stuck with that problem for a long period of time and you think you understand the problem, then chances are you actually don't understand the problem, because the problems that you correctly understand are the ones that you fix. And the ones that you incorrectly understand will stay unfixable, right? Does that kind of make sense? So sometimes what happens is people will have a problem for like 10 years and they'll say this is an unfixable problem because it's been a problem for 10 years. But the reason it's been unfixable is because you've misunderstood it, which actually means it is quite possible to fix it. Okay, does that make sense? I know it's kind of weird. So one way to kind of think about this in the field of medicine is, let's say I have a diagnosis, DX1, and then DX1 has 3 treatment options. It has T1, T2, T3, right? And let's say treatment 1 doesn't work, treatment 2 doesn't work, treatment 3 doesn't work. And then you conclude that DX1 is unsolvable, uncurable, unfixable. But it turns out that what you really need to do to fix this problem is recognize that this is a different diagnosis. You had the wrong diagnosis. And it turns out that you do T1 over here, and then this fixes the problem. This happens all the time in medicine. This is why a lot of people think that medicine is about treatment. Medicine is not just about treatment. That's only half of it. Half of our training is in diagnosing the problem correctly. And so what I tend to see is people will have challenges like this, which I'm not saying these challenges aren't real. They are real. And there's a lot that we're going to discover here that is actually quite logical. It's not illogical at all. It's 100% logical. But just because it's logical doesn't mean that it is correct. It just means that it is correct in a form. So let's understand this, okay? So first, mistake number 1. Since I was in my early teens, dating and relationships were the most important thing for me. However, despite that fact, this is the first thing to understand: importance and success. Because as we will discover, something being really, really important to you makes it much harder to succeed, not much easier. Okay? Years passed by and I barely had any experiences. All the ones I did have were really negative and hurt me. Lots, or not some, lots. Let's use the word all. Okay? All experiences were bad. Hurtful. Okay? Now, almost every time the topic comes up, I feel a pulling pain in the middle of my chest that is really overwhelming. My friends talk about a ton of experiences. I'm 23, and I feel like nothing I can experience in the future will ever outweigh what I've already experienced. Okay? So, nothing will make it better. Now, people may look at this and they may say, oh my God, this person has lost all hope. They are wrong. No, they are not wrong. They are not wrong at all. If you are someone who has suffered a lot and you think that nothing can make it better, you may be surprised how right you are, but don't give up hope. Okay? I just can't imagine anything that would justify the mental agony I went through so far. And you are correct. Justify the mental agony. Okay? Which might seem theatrical. Maybe I'm a sensitive person. Don't do that. Okay, we're going to touch on this. I'm a sensitive person. Okay? I'm taking notes. I'll show you all in a second. The disappointment with myself for failing at the thing that had always been the most important to me is sometimes crushing me. Hold on a second. Now we begin to see. Okay? Okay, so here's the interesting thing. Here's the first thing that I'm going to point out. So because this is the most important thing for you, failing at it is crushing. So this is very important to understand. Okay, now we're going to get to it. So here are problems. Importance and success, number one. So a lot of people assume that if something is really important to you, it makes it easier to be successful. But actually, especially with dating, having it be of hyper importance is one of the most negative things you can do for your chances for success. So I'll give you all, this isn't just dating. This is other things as well. Oh my God, I'm terrified. I have to do well on this exam. I have to do well on this exam. This exam is, I have to do good. I have to do good. I have to do good. I'm so stressed out about it. I don't sleep. I study for 8 hours and I think to myself, oh my God, this isn't enough. Other people know more than me. It has to be successful. It has to be successful. I panic myself. Am I doing well? Did I get that right? Did I get that wrong? I have no confidence in my ability. I second guess all of my answers on the test and I end up getting a C+. The importance of a thing does not necessarily improve its chances of success. And now we see a second problem when something is really important to you. Okay? Which is that not only do you have the original, let's call it a failure, okay? But now since you failed at something, so there's just the failure itself. Let's say I wasn't able to date. Okay, that's bad. But if this is the most important to me, then what I have is a second part of crushing defeat, that I have failed at the thing that is the most important to me. That is actually independent of the failure to date. Does that make sense? So there are two injuries here. Number one is failure to date. And number two is crushing defeat because number one. Okay, so I know this sounds insane, but one thing you can do in this situation is start to have this be less important to you. And we'll talk about what that is, okay? So I'll give you all, like then people will say, but aren't I allowed to want what I want? And this is important to me. And like, this is how I am. And I love it so much, but hold on a second, back up a second, okay? So a couple of things. So I learned this the easy way. So I got super lucky, right? I decided to become a monk. So I had years and years of like, I'd want to say 5 years of just pathetic attempts to date. And people will say, oh my God, 5 years, that's nothing. I've had 20 years. And it's not the number of years that you have. And this is kind of what I discovered, is that there's a different way to do it. If I'd kept operating the same way I had operated, I would have gone 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, right? A broken clock may be right twice a day, but it's wrong at all the other times. So this is how we need to approach dating. So basically what I did is decided to become a monk. And then I gave up the importance of dating. This is not for me. And paradoxically, this helped me become more attractive because I was so caught up in my own stuff that it was like stressing people out and I wasn't my best self and all this other stuff that people talk about in dating. So let's talk a little bit about how to make dating less important. Now, the first thing that's going to happen is if I talk about making dating less important, there is going to be a torrent of disagreement. Nah, Dr. K, it's the most important. How dare you tell me to value? Oh my God. This is important to me. It's all I care about. Yeah, so let's understand what happens. So when you have very little experience dating and you care a lot about dating, what happens in your mind? So you start to build up fantasies, right? So how does the mind know when you say this is the most important thing to you? So let's understand this for a second, okay? This is why importance is just bad. We'll get to how to incorporate importance. So let's just understand this. If someone has no experience with dating and they say getting laid is the most important thing to me, having a relationship is the most important thing to me, okay, when they're in this situation, what is it that's important to you? Like literally, what is it? It's the relationship. But have you ever had a relationship? How can you value something that you have no knowledge of? Just think about it for a second. Right? So if someone's like, oh yeah, like I have dreams to be an Olympic athlete, like I have dreams to be an Olympic athlete. It's everything in the world to me. And so I recently saw this interesting article that the day after Michael Phelps, I think, won like 4 gold medals or something when the Olympics was over, he wakes up the next day and he's suicidal. What? This guy's crazy. So the first thing to understand is that if dating and relationships are very, the most important, oh, I want love. This is what I need to be fulfilled. I have this ache in my heart. I've been there, right? I had it too. Maybe that's better. No, we'll leave that on. Close the windows in a second. So if you're, just think about this, okay? So if this is really important to you, what is it that your mind thinks this is? And what tends to happen when we value something that we have no experience over is we construct a fantasy. And the moment that you construct a fantasy, you have really set yourself up for a lot of problems because the reality will be different from it. So instead of like even like a neutral experience, so now we'll get to a couple of things, okay? So let's take a look at this. So let's say I've constructed a fantasy. So once I construct a fantasy, let's say that this is relationships are the most important thing to me. They're 100, right? And then I have a real experience, which is normal, which is a 50. But what do I see? I see a minus 50. Now, if you're someone who does this, your mind will rebel against this idea 100%. No, Dr. K, you don't understand my situation. My situation is different. But let's just take a step back and I'll ask you, forget about your situation. Let's just understand the general principle. When you have no experience of something, how on earth can you value it? Or you have very little experience of it. How do you understand its accurate value? And so the problem is we create all of these fantasies. It becomes really, really important to us. And when something becomes important to us, we run into all kinds of problems because this is an average normal experience, which looks like a minus 50 in your book. So you're opening the door to negative bias. You're also opening the door to stress, which is going to make you less attractive. You are looking for something in particular instead of letting relationships be organic. And since I decided to become a monk, all of my romantic interactions have been like relatively organic, right? So this is what tends to happen when you have a lot of people, when you see these people out there who are like, I don't understand how this person keeps on finding relationships and like where they're meeting people, like they just seem to be so good at it. And I think that there is a natural organicness to relationships. That's how human relationships are designed to evolve. And once you start adding importance and stress to the relationship, it really sabotages your chances. And there's one other source of sabotage that importance in a relationship causes, okay? So the more important you think it is, the worse off it is. There's one other person that this really harms, and that is your prospective partner. So when a relationship is the most important thing to you, oh my God, relationships are the most important thing to me. Oh my God, I need it. I need it. This is what they mean to me. They mean that there's love and there's commitment. And there's like someone on your team all the time, someone there for you whenever you need it. And then you have this idea of, oh my God, like this relationship with this what a beautiful relationship. And then some unlucky human being has to pick up that mantle. Some unlucky human being with flaws is now trying to interact with you. But you're not interacting with them because you have a preconceived idea of what the relationship should be. This is what I want. I need all of these things from relate. And then some human, just a person is like, I don't know how to handle this. Like, I can't make this person happy. Or like, this is weird. So they feel all of that pressure and it pushes them away. So paradoxically, the first thing that you need to do, if relationships are the most important thing in the world to you, is make them less important. Secondly, if you're like, I don't want to do that, right? If you're so clinging to that you cannot change that, then examine that for a moment. And then the second thing that you can do, even if you don't want to make it so important to you, if you don't want to make it less important, sorry, there are other things that you can do, which is observe these 3 things that I've told you. So when you make it a relationship super important to you, what do you construct in your mind? How does your fantastical construction affect your interpretation of real experiences? Chances are it'll be disappointing. How does it affect your stress level when you try to engage in this? Because relationships are supposed to be fun, right? That's the whole point, is everyone's like laughing and having sex and cuddling and maybe getting married and going on vacation and finishing each other's sandwiches. This is what a relationship is supposed to be. That's why you want it so much. But what is it like for you? Right? So as you bring that stress to the table, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying that this is a very common problem where people will make relationships so important to them and then they end up shooting themselves in the foot. Give me a second. I got to close some of these blinds. Okay. Okay, let's look at number 2. How to make relationships less important. So now let's understand this, okay? We'll talk about it. It's a good question. So if you want to make relationships less important, here's what you got to do. Number 1, just notice what this relationship being so important to you means, okay? So like, here's what we're going to notice about relationships. Okay? And so just ask yourself, okay, if this is important to me, what does it mean to be in a relationship? Like, what is the significance of being in a relationship? Okay? And also, like, who am I if I'm in a relationship? And then, like, who am I not? Unless I'm in a relationship. So how do you see yourself if you are in a relationship or not in a relationship? Right? And that's when like we'll start to see that there's a lot of stuff that you attach. So you need to just look at that kind of stuff. Okay? What do I think a relationship is? Right? And then once you answer that question, then ask yourself, where did I get this idea? And I'm not saying that the idea is going to be wholly fictional, because even our fictional representations are rooted in reality. But you need to just like look at what your mind is doing if you're so caught up in relationships. Right? And then the last thing, this is what's really important. So if something is important to you, I don't know if this makes sense, but for people who are the important relationships are so important to them, there is an ache or a hunger. And this ache and hunger is so profound. This is why you can't make relationships less important for you, because on some level you are starving. You're hungry. There's something deep down inside you that is unfulfilled. And the thought of having that thing unfulfilled for the rest of your life, if you decrease the value of relationships, oh my God, it'll be unfulfilled for the rest of my life. That hunger will always be there. That hunger is unbearable. This is why it's impossible to make them less important. Because you have that ache, you have that hunger. And to really understand, where does this come from? And this is one of the weird things that I found as a psychiatrist, is that oftentimes we look at these things like trauma. And we say, oh my God, like this sounds like a case of trauma. Like this person must have been hurt very deeply when they were young. And they look back at their lives and they think to themselves, okay, I never had anything like that. There's no smoking gun in my childhood. My parents were pretty chill. They were pretty loving. They're still together. I don't know where this hunger comes from. And so sometimes I will explore the concept of past lives with people like my patients. Right? And there's all kind, like, who knows where it comes from? Maybe it doesn't come from this life. I'm not saying their past lives are real or things like that. I think there's therapeutic value to operating in whatever frame a patient considers helpful. Right? So if they believe in God, we talk about God. If they don't believe in God, we don't talk about God. It depends on the patient. But for you, just because you can't find the answers, expand your horizon a little bit. Right? It comes from somewhere. All things come from somewhere. Nothing is random in the world. Cause and effect. So really explore that hunger, because this is going to be what makes it really hard. And if you do these 4 things, this is going to be the first step to really understanding how to make relationships less important for you. Because as it turns out, relationships being important may actually sabotage your chances of success. And we see this a ton in our coaching program. So we've had about 12,000 or 15,000 people go through it now. And like a lot of times they'll come in with some problem that they think is really, really huge. And then what the coaches are really good at is like helping them understand, okay, wait, the way that you are playing the game is actually what's creating the result. It's not that the game is rigged. It's that you're misplaying. You make the same mistake over and over and over again. And then somehow as like they understand this stuff, then they like start to get better. And then suddenly they're like in relationships. It's weird. We've seen it a ton. Okay. And these are like people from our community, right? So this isn't just like some other theoretical, fictitious person who spends more time on LinkedIn than on Reddit or Twitch or YouTube or whatever. So like this is like us. Okay? So really you have to understand what strategy you're using to play the game. And then you'll be surprised that if you can reduce the importance of the relationship, it frees you up more and it makes it more accessible. But if you're approaching it from a place of stress, with high expectations and low self-worth, this is a recipe for disaster. Let's just think about it, right? If I were to tell you, okay, hey, like this person wants to get in a relationship. Oh, tell me about the person. Well, they have super high expectations. They have fantastical ideas about what a relationship should be like. They have super low self-esteem. They're stressed out a ton about relationships. And they feel a crushing sadness every 2 weeks that is crippling for them. How optimistic would you be? Right? And some of these things are in your control. Notice I didn't say I'm not disputing that this person had negative experiences. All the ones I did have were really negative and hurt me. We'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about, forget about it a second. Let's talk about it now. So this is kind of bizarre. But when you really want a relationship, why is it that what little experience you do have is so painful and sucks? Right? That's what we see. Is that like, oh my God, like all the experience I've had are hard. So we can talk about something like cognitive bias if y'all really want to. There may be some degree of cognitive bias here. There's good evidence of that. But here's what tends to happen. When you are desperate for a relationship and you feel like you have low self-esteem, you do a very, very interesting psychological thing, which is that you remove all of the healthy relationship possibilities from the equation before you even get started. You discount all the people that would lead to a good relationship. So I'll give you all a really interesting example for this. When I graduated from college, so I was a 5th-year senior, right? Finished with a 2.5 GPA. I applied for research positions because I had a degree in neurobiology. I applied to 131 research positions. And I got rejected from all of them except for one. The one research position I ended up getting was at Harvard Medical School's Osher Research Center. And I was really surprised because I was like, holy crap, I applied to University of Texas, San Antonio and like Texas Tech University for research positions. And I wind up going to interview at Harvard. And then I kind of asked a couple months later, I was like, how did I get this job? And they were like, you were the only one that applied. I was like, what? So there is a glut of mediocrity. What happens with people is they tend to undershoot where they actually are. So you have to understand this, okay? If you have low self-esteem, do you accurately gauge what your worth is? Of course not. That's the whole point. It's low self-esteem. Like, you think it's accurate, but you think 1,000 people have low self-esteem. Are they accurately judging where they are? No, they're not. So then what happens is you have the possibility of a relationship with someone. And I see this a lot, especially in the people I work with, because the people I work with are all broken. So they look at someone on a dating app and they're like, that person isn't broken enough. That person wouldn't ever want to date me. Oh my God, you're so telepathic? My God, you know this person so well. You know what their preferences are. You know what they're attracted to. No, but they put something in their dating profile that I don't fit. Well, like, that's a little bit silly, because the only things we put in dating profiles are things that don't relate to the success of a relationship. I know that sounded weird, so I'll rephrase. So dating profiles are restricted with the kind of information that you can put. And do dating profiles capture the actual variables that lead to successful relationships? No, they don't. Right? There's all kinds of variables that lead to successful relationships, like shared emotional experience the first time you meet. You can't put that on a dating app. Right? Everyone assumes that it's different, shared religion, and everybody who wants, like, you know, I want to be a sugar daddy, or I want to be a sugar baby, and somebody else wants to be a sugar mama. And like, as long as the babies and the mamas and the daddies all get together, everybody's happy. But that's not actually what leads to relationships. So the first thing is, when we have low self-esteem, when we think that, oh my God, this is like, I'm not good at this. The biggest mistake that we make is we remove all the people that are too good for us. And then we're left with all the people who are a little bit busted. And then no wonder we have negative experiences, right? Because you're selecting the one person that feels safe to you, which is someone who is unable to have a healthy relationship. So we see this pattern. It's been very well studied in trauma. So when you have children who are abused, they will date people who are abusive. Why? What's going on there? It's because when there's someone who's not abusive, the person gets so confused, they'd never consider dating them in the first place because it's weird, that person's too good for me. Or they get scared by the lack of abuse. When is the other shoe going to drop? This person is being really nice. That must mean that they're going to be really nasty to me later. And you may say, but Dr. K, why would you think that? Just think about it for a second, right? If you're a child who grows up in an abusive household, usually your parents are not all nasty. They're humans, which means that they also experience guilt. So on one day, you're abused, and on the next day, your parent is like, I'm so sorry, here's a PS5. Let me make it up to you. And then a few months later, they start drinking again, the abuse starts, they feel guilty, they're 30 days sober, the gifts start coming. And so what does this person start to understand about gifts? Holy crap, they're tied with abuse. And so then you have a healthy partner who starts giving you gifts, and you're like, oh shit, I better run. Because there's another aspect of this, if you struggled with abuse, is that when you meet someone that you really, really like, who is not abusive, I don't know if this makes any sense, but the thought of this one good person that you really believe you could love and could really be the one who is not abusive, the thought of that person one day becoming abusive is so scary that you just retreat from the relationship. I can't afford to lose all hope, because if this person turns out bad, if this good apple turns into a bad apple, then all of my hope is lost. So that you leave. Let me preserve the idea of a good apple out there. And so part of the reason that we have such negative experiences, if you have low self-esteem, who are you going to feel comfortable engaging in romantic relationships with, asking out on dates? Right? So then we have this real problem where, of course, your experiences are negative, but that's because of who you're selecting. And then people may say, but I have this like idea, like, but I fell in love. Oh my God, I fell in love, right? So this is the fantasy again. Falling in love is the stupidest thing you can do. It's like the whole point is that the biology of your system doesn't give a shit about the long-term consequences and whether this is going to be emotionally good or emotionally bad. It doesn't care. That's how we're wired. We're wired to think about like ignore the consequences. Literally, our brain is wired to like, oh my God, I'm in love. I guess I better shut off all the parts of my brain that allow me to calculate risks. Oh my God, I'm in love. Oh yeah, all those red flags, they're just personality quirks. It's just a phase. I can fix him. I can fix her. With my help, oh my goodness, they will turn into such a delicious peach pie. Oh my God. We start to ignore all these things. Right? And so this is why we have negative experiences. And so this is also why people say work on yourself before you start dating. Now, if only that worked. The sad truth of the matter, and we know this from studies on attachment theory, is that oftentimes if you're so busted and you have low self-esteem, you can't necessarily fix that on your own. I mean, a lot of people do, and I think it's a worthwhile endeavor for you to try to fix it on your own. But the sad truth of the matter is that we know from, lots of research on psychotherapy and stuff like that, that like oftentimes we need corrective emotional experiences to heal that trauma. And those corrective emotional experiences are provided by other human beings. And this is something that we don't like to say, especially in the West, because we have this culture of independence. I should be able to do it myself. But like, that's not how human beings were wired. We were wired as a tribe, right? It's a multiplayer game. You can't solo all the content. And now people are going to be like, okay, but does that mean I'm screwed because now I have to rely on other people and I have to work on myself? Like, I don't understand. What are you telling me to do, Doc? I'm telling you it's a slow process. Understand the nuances of it. You can't just work on yourself, but you should work on yourself and also recognize your relationship patterns, right? How is it that I wind up in the same place over and over and over again? And whatever answer your mind comes up with, that is wrong. If it is an answer that it has already given you, it is wrong. It must be a new answer. This is the nature of diagnosis and treatment. If you have one diagnosis and all 3 treatments have failed, consider a second diagnosis. Right? And this is what we see. Like, so I've worked with people who are incels, and they have this belief that because their jaw is whatever, they will never have a date. It's impossible for them to find love. And they all believe this. And this is where you have to be super careful, because if you have a diagnosis that is unactionable, you're screwed. Right? And we have those in medicine. We have things like stage 4 metastatic cancer. We have secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. We have ALS, right? We have stroke, where like you lose a chunk of the brain and it doesn't really come back. Like, brain doesn't regenerate much. But usually with some of these problems that we see a lot with dating, a lot of these are very correctable, because the problem is not actually in the world. It is in the way that you perceive and interact with the world. And that can change. We know, for example, that people who have borderline personality disorder, probably about 90% of them will get better within a decade. The specific numbers vary depending on the study or whatever. But a big part of that can be a single healthy relationship for 2 years leads to 50% of people being in remission from BPD. So I know that everyone's like, just work on yourself. You can't fix yourself first and then engage in a relationship. It's great. Give it a shot by all means. But if it doesn't work, it's not like you have to fix yourself first and then enter a relationship. The two need to be concurrent, probably. And the most important thing is pay attention to your patterns that got you here in the first place. Okay? Okay, let's talk about a couple of other things about this post. So, undo ad strokes. Undo. I don't know what that means. Let's talk about the others. So we talked about the importance and success. We also talk about all experiences were hurtful, right? Now let's talking about pulling pain and nothing will make it better. Okay. So when we have negative emotional experiences, this emotion gets stored in the body and in the mind. And we tend to have these physical sensations. So what tends to happen is that anytime we have overwhelming negative stuff, our brain and body are like, we can't deal with this. So we push it down. We wall it off behind psychological defense mechanisms. We'll do things like self-medicate with substances, with video games, porn, whatever. And then all those emotions get shoved to the side. And then we enter this kind of thinking that nothing will make it better and nothing will justify the mental agony. And this is actually 100% logical, because thus far, what have you experienced that would make this pain worthwhile? Nothing. So you have no frame of reference, right? All you've been taking is bitter medicine every day, and you're like, I can't imagine any situation in which I would ever want to put anything into my mouth, because all I'm eating is bitter medicine every single day. And it's like, yeah, if you've never tasted a mango or a BLT or whatever, like it would make sense that you've never had an experience that would make it, nothing will make it worthwhile, right? So if you've never had that experience, of course nothing is going to make it worthwhile. That doesn't mean that nothing is theoretically out there. And this is another bias of the mind that we have to be careful about. The mind operates under the assumption that my experiences are mirrors of objective reality, but that's not true. Right? Your mind just constructs whatever reality it's got. And that's the best it kind of does. And so it is okay for you to think this way. And just because you think that way, because all of your experiences up to the age of 23 have made it so that nothing is worth the pain, so be it. But that's just all the experiences up to 23. Arguably, you've got about 60 years left, right? So you've got, let's say you started puberty around 14. So you've been doing this for, let's say, a decade, and you've got 6 of those left. And so things can change. So this is where we strongly recommend things like, emotional processing. And this person is in therapy, which can be very helpful. But I'd strongly recommend that if y'all are in therapy and you have a problem like this is what you work on in therapy. I used to think this was obvious until I realized that a lot of people don't. It's not obvious, actually. That when you are in therapy, you are working on something. And what a lot of patients don't realize is you can pick what that is. It is your therapist's job to fix what you want. And then a lot of people may be like, but oh my God, can they fix me? Yeah, like that's our job. Like that's what we're there to do. If someone comes in and says, hey, I've got OCD and I wash my hands 15 times a day and my hands, I keep on getting infections. The therapist's job is to help you with that. Or if it's something like this, their job is to help you deal with this pulling pain in your chest so you don't have to walk around with it all day long. Okay? So a lot of people will go into therapy and then like their therapist is like, ask some weird open-ended question, and then you just talk about you think you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in therapy instead of actually doing what you want to do in therapy. Go and do what you want to do. Okay? And then the last thing that you have to be super careful about. This is the most devastating thing. Okay? So sometimes when all this negative stuff happens, we end up with this sentence. Out of everything in this post, this is the most damaging thing. So when we go through life, we have experiences. And this part of our brain called the default mode network takes these individual experiences and makes a conclusion about me. I'm just a sensitive person. So when I was growing up, for example, I thought I was unathletic. And how did I arrive at that conclusion? Well, I was last to be picked on the basketball team. I was last to be picked on the football team. I was last to be picked for anything. And I was never the winner of any sports contest. I never came in first when we were running. And so I concluded, I'm not bad at basketball. I'm not bad at this. I'm not bad. I am unathletic. So then what happens is once I start to think, oh my God, I am unathletic, then opportunities arose later in life where they were like, hey, do you want to do this thing? And I was like, nah, I'm not athletic. It's not for me. It's not who I am. And so then what happened is I stopped engaging in athletic activities, which then reinforced the idea that I'm unathletic because everybody else is doing athletic stuff and now I'm just playing video games all day. I'm unathletic. Now, what's wrong about this? Maybe I was unathletic. No, I came to an incorrect conclusion. I was a 6-year-old competing against 7-year-olds or even 8-year-olds. That's why I was last. It wasn't that I was unathletic. It was the deck was stacked against me. I was placed into a physical bracket where people were like physically larger and faster and more coordinated. And by the way, had a year of practice over me. Right? So then we're in like big trouble. So the one thing you've got to be super careful about if you are in this dating hellscape is be careful about what conclusions your mind draws about you. And you will have what appears to be the right evidence at the time to form that conclusion. Don't misunderstand this. I'm not saying that you're not logical. It's that you have incomplete information. So it was also a logical conclusion for a 5-year-old to think like, okay, like I'm unathletic because I suck at all this, clearly. But I didn't have the frame of mind to think, oh, like I didn't think to myself, how much older are these kids? Right? Maybe that has something to do with it. So be super careful about making meta-level conclusions about your identity from dating, because chances are they're not correct. Doesn't mean that they're not logical, they're just incomplete. So if we had taken you and put you in a different circumstance or strengthened your skills in some sort of way or sent you to therapy or whatever else, it's very possible that you would be in a different scenario right now. And all of those actions can still be taken. Okay? And then the last thing that I'll talk about is, the disappointment with myself for failing at the thing that had always been the most important to me. So this is the problem of two arrows, right? This is the problem of like, okay, not only do I have a setback in life, but now I am beating myself up because I had a setback in life. And so now you have two things to overcome. So I know it can sound really, really challenging that if you've been in this situation where you can't recover from your terrible dating experience. I'm not disputing that your experience has been terrible. I'm not saying that things aren't hard. I'm not saying that the mental agony you've experienced is false in any way, shape, or form. But my consistent experience working with people from all walks of life, and this includes people who are in prison, people who are homeless, and people who are billionaires. I've seen the whole spectrum, right? Not all spectrum of all human beings, but I've seen a wide range. And what I found, the one thing that we fail to understand, the one most common mistake that human beings make is that they do not understand how their actions shape the world that they live in. And this becomes even more of a problem because as you stop believing that your actions shape the world, right? It's kind of like this external idea of, okay, everything is determined for me. Then you give up on your actions actually having any sort of impact. And then you start ignoring your actions. And once you start ignoring your actions, you ignore the one thing that can actually fix things for you. So look at the way that you're playing the game. Really ask yourself, question yourself, how can I do this differently? And what the real thing that's really fascinating is it's not, and then people will go post online, they'll be like, what should I do? No, you need to look at your thought process. Even before you post, look at all of the assumptions that you have and how your mind arrives at those conclusions. Because posting things online is a terrible way to get advice. And why is that? It's because what you post is going to be biased by your mind. You're not going to get some objective thing. If you guys know what I'm talking about, you go to some, political subreddit or gendered subreddit, and it's just like it's an echo chamber. And people post one way. No one ever says like, hey, maybe you're making a mistake here. Right? It's always like, oh my God, like everyone else is terrible and you should break up with them right away. Like this is a huge red flag. Huge red flag. The game is rigged from the start. The game isn't rigged from the start. The game is rigged by our mind. And we have so much more power than we really understand until you start exercising it properly. And then you realize, holy crap, I can affect change. Okay, and it's not anyone's fault because this too is like when we were not taught this stuff. Because the society we used to live in, you didn't need to like understand your mind this well. The problem is that in today's society, we get bombarded with so much crappy information that it shapes the way that we see the world. And we have all of these things that everyone is doing, which are like terribly inefficient, like online dating. It was supposed to fix things and it somehow made things worse, but now everyone's stuck. Because it's like, how am I supposed to meet people without an app? That's where everyone is. right? So it's like either I use this bad thing that everyone is using, or I'm the one person that doesn't use it. And then I can't meet anyone anyway. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But even that conception is incorrect, because lots of people get together without online dating. And a lot of people get together with online dating. Maybe you should do both. Yeah, so someone saying, boy, have I had some narratives running me into faults. What a beautiful way to put it. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, every Friday on our subreddit is the one day that we are allowed to post things about dating and relationships. I think I will never have a girlfriend. I think you're wrong and I'm pretty hopeful for you. And then we get mad. So we got to talk about this. This is a great meme. So, see, when we talk on the internet, this is not just talking about internet. We're going to teach y'all a little thing about understanding how people communicate and what people are looking for when they communicate. Okay? So sometimes when we communicate, we're not looking to be contradicted, helped, or anything. We just want to wallow in our self-pity. And oftentimes, the reason that this kind of thing, this kind of encouragement doesn't help is because it's very invalidating. This is not what this person wants to hear. Right? So I don't know if y'all have ever seen this, like on video game forums or like whatever, but someone's like, oh, this particular character is so OP. And then like people are like, no, it's actually not that OP. This is just, this is how you beat it. And then the person is like, no, that doesn't work. Screw you. Right? So like, this is one of those situations. What does that person want? So the next time I want y'all to see something, I want y'all to watch something. Okay. The next time you see someone on the internet posting about an OP character in a video game, I want you to respond to them and say, oh yeah, oh my God, that person is so busted. I was in a game recently where they did this and that was like completely crazy. And watch what happens. So the rest of the internet may downvote you, but watch what the original person who posted about this character being okay, watch how they respond. They will love you for it because they're wrong. And the internet loves to tell them that they're wrong. You're the one person that's telling them that they're right. So in this situation, we have to be super careful. Because if we're not careful, we will wind up in places where I think I will never have a girlfriend. You will end up in some corner of the internet where everyone else will tell you, yes, that is correct. Women are, in this environment, women are just completely undateable or this or that or like whatever they're going to say. You can find corners of the internet where they say the same things about men. Recently, I've stumbled into all of this bisexual hatred, which I don't know if you guys have seen this, but, like, they get ostracized by everybody. And they have trouble, like, I've worked with men who are bisexual and have a lot of trouble dating women, like, because the women judge them for being bisexual. And it makes them less manly, apparently. Right? And so there's any corner of the internet, well, you'll find like an echo chamber of hatred, and that's where you have to be super careful. Because if you ignore everybody else who disagrees with you, and you just post this kind of stuff, and you get angry with dissenting opinions, eventually you will find a corner of the internet where no one disagrees with you. And then your feelings will get set in stone. And then you will start operating based on a worldview that is quite radical. That doesn't help you. It just helps you feel good. Huge difference. Okay. All right, I'm going to grab some water real quick. And then I'll leave y'all with this. Okay, I haven't had sex or any form of intimacy for 10 years, and it's eating me alive. Food can be... I'll leave y'all with this. Okay. I haven't had sex or any form of intimacy for 10 years and it's eating me alive. Food can be a form of creative expression. I put my emotions into my cooking. This tastes horny. Is nice to be understood. Oh my God. Please, please, please. I don't want to know what food that tastes horny tastes like. I don't know. What do y'all think, chat? What are the horniest foods? What do y'all think? What do y'all think? We should do a poll. What are a tier maker? Tier list? Shrimp, mayo, salty sausage, pineapple, chocolate covered strawberries, bone marrow, special sauce. Okay. Bruno Costa. Hi, Dr. K from Brazil. Please, your golden advice for a 30-year-old virgin on everything with a date scheduled with a foreigner for next month. Okay. So what should you do if you're a 30-year-old virgin who is having their first date in a month? Okay, so here's Dr. K's guide to if you're a virgin who's dating for the first time, what to do. You've got 30 days. The first thing is you got to feel comfortable in your own body. So this is what is to be understood. When we are dating and we are inexperienced and we're virgins, our main enemy is the virgin inside you. That is what you're trying to conquer. So how do you conquer the virgin inside you? The virgin inside you doesn't think that they look good. They don't feel good. They're stressed out. They lack confidence. So the first thing you've got to do is feel good in your own body. Now, you may not be able to do that in 30 days, but let's get started. So in 30 days, you will be able to see at least some kind of change in your physical body if you start exercising today, if you start stretching today. We want you to literally feel good in your own body, is what little amount that you can. Okay? And then what we really want you to pay attention to is whatever progress you can make in 30 days. That's the goal. And in terms of the stakes, oh, but what if I procrastinate? What if I do this? What if I do this? Remember, the goal here is that you want to feel as good as you can in 30 days, and the clock is ticking. So feeling good in your body can be exercising, can also be things like mind-body practices, like yoga and Tai Chi. When your ass gets up out of the chair and you feel grown and clunky and sore and stiff, that doesn't feel good. So when your body is rusty, your mind will be rusty. Okay, so you gotta exercise or do your mind-body practices, whatever, something to feel good. You can go for a walk. That's totally fine. You can walk for 30 days and that'll be good enough. Go for a 1 hour walk for 30 days. Do it. Feel good in your own body. A second part of that is oftentimes upgrading your physical appearance in whatever way you can. So get a nice haircut, get some advice from people, maybe get some new clothing, really pay attention to your wardrobe. Consider shaving, right? So like get some advice. This is like, I think, okay, there's this, thing of looks maxing that everybody's doing nowadays. I think some of it's kind of body dysmorphia in disguise, but some of it's like pretty good, right? So do what you can to feel good in your body. Second thing is that when we have a date, and we're virgins, we think that everything goes into this date. Oh my God, this is the chance. Like this is going to be what determines my future. No, this doesn't determine your future. This is practice for the future. So every date that you go on is not about succeeding at the date or failing at the date. Every date you go on is to prepare you and level up for the next date. That's frame of mind change number 2. Because when you've been hungry for so long and someone finally gives you food, oh my God, I need to eat it. No, slow it down. Everything is about leveling up for the future. That's what this date is. And the third thing that I would strongly recommend is that you try to attach no outcomes to this date. Don't try to get laid. Don't even try to get a second date or anything like that. Try to have a good time. So this is the way that I want y'all to think about dating. So in my life, I can be with someone, with a lot of people, with one person, with no people. You can pick whatever. And so you're going on a date to try to get to know someone, appreciate them for who they are, and see if you have some kind of natural inclination towards them. See if y'all can vibe together or not. It's a vibe check. That's what a date is. So it's not about an outcome. It's about an experience. So go there with the attitude of not, I need to impress this person and this person needs to like me or anything like that. Don't let all that stuff go. You're going to show up as yourself. They're going to show up as themselves. You're going to be a polished version of you, right? So you want to make it enjoyable for them as well. And just try to enjoy the experience. I think that's what I sort of found is like, I know this is going to sound arrogant, but same sort of thing happened is that like this was the big thing that changed a lot for me. So it started with me being a monk. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be a monk. So now that I'm hanging out with girls, like there's no semblance of any kind of romantic anything. It's not an option. It's off the table. So I can relax and I can just have a good time, right? Let's just go hang out. Let's go to lunch somewhere. Hey, are you done? We're done with lunch. Do you want to like go do something else? Like, let's go for a hike. And then you end up hanging out with people and they wind up being a little bit more attracted to you. And then when I was in med school, contrary to popular belief, it's not like everyone salivates over doctors. It doesn't fix everything immediately. And we're not even doctors yet. We're med students. Same sort of attitude. So I was engaged in med school. So I was like, all right, there's no like, everyone else is like, oh my God, like who are the hot singles? Like, let's like, oh my God, let's go. But I was like, yeah, I'm not going to play that game. So instead, when I hung out with people, it's just, let's have fun. And then sometimes there's attraction that sparks. And that's okay. Right? Then we shut it down. That's a conversation for a different day, right? One day, I long for the day in this community when someone's like, how do I cut back on the romantic stuff? Actually, I don't long for the day. We've had that day for so many times. We've had so many women in our community. It's like, how do I just make a friend without them trying to get into my pants? So we've been there already. I long for the day that the men in our community can experience that too, right? So then we'll be shared and tied in our suffering. And then the gender dynamics in our community will improve. So this is what I would say is try to have a good time, right? Recognize that this is not the end of the world or the beginning of the world. It's one date and you should learn as much as you can from it. Third thing is be comfortable in your body. The more comfortable you are in your body, the more confident you will be, the more relaxed you will be, the more you will enjoy the experience. Okay? So one other thought that I had that I'm blanking on. See, let's talk about arranged marriage for a second. So are you saying that I should have an arranged marriage? No. So let's understand something. So any system has advantages and disadvantages. And I didn't have an arranged marriage. My parents didn't have an arranged marriage. It was very scandalous back in the day. And so when people say like, oh my God, arranged marriages are so bad for all of these million reasons, and they can be really, really bad. So I had a family member who basically like was kind of forced into an arranged marriage. The family was like somewhat abusive. Like they basically wanted an unpaid servant, right? So, and someone to like cook and clean, and like there was no affection or equality or respect or anything like that. And so my family member left, right? And it was very scandalous in the community because they're like, oh my God, now she's like damaged goods. Oh my God. They would say all these kinds of things. And so we can look at the evils of arranged marriage in that way, and they can be very evil, right? And also there's a reason why we used to do it. And the one thing that we forget about arranged marriage is that what we look for in a partner may not be what leads to a successful marriage, right? So here we are looking for what we want. And how's that working out for us? Because we know what we want and we deserve what we want, right? I deserve everything in life, especially when it comes to love. No one's raising their kids and being like, yeah, I have daughters and I'm not, I've never said this to them where I'm like, yeah, I know that true love is really important, but chances are you're going to have to settle for half of what you're really looking for because that's life. No dad talks their daughters that way. Like, it's absurd, right? We don't talk to our sons that way. You just got to settle, bro. You're not going to get what you want. So we create all these ideas that, oh, you should have absolutely what you want. And by the way, you're a good judge, right? Let's keep that in mind. So the one advantage of arranged marriage is that your parents, chances are, have more experience in understanding what creates a safe, healthy, long-term relationship than you do. Maybe not safe, who knows? And so they have an idea of your personality traits better than you do. They know what will complement you well. So that's what they sort of make the decision based on. Because when we're at the helm, it's not like we're always doing great. Right? So, and this is the problem with things like dating apps, is dating apps don't actually allow you to select for the variables that correlate with success in long-term relationships. We just pick things that are all superficial, like income and appearance and whatever, vibe, whatever. Right? You just answer these random things. And that's why, by the way, I don't know if y'all have noticed, but dating apps have moved in the direction of being like less clear. So they're offering more ambiguous information, like, you know, tell me something interesting about yourself, because they've realized that if we just have a bunch of checkboxes, it doesn't work. So they're trying to get closer to the factors that actually correlate with successful relationships. Right? So, I mean, it's not that arranged marriages are good or we should go back to them. It's that they have some advantages, which is that if you grew up with parents who understand what makes a healthy relationship, and if you assume that your parents know you pretty well, then they can be very advantageous at helping you find someone who would be a good partner, right? They can have that information more than you can. And in the current version of arranged marriage, it's usually not like you meet your bride on the day or husband on the day of the marriage. Those happen in India and some places still. But nowadays, the way that arranged marriage works for most like NRIs or other people is that you basically, like in the Western system, right, in America, you date someone for a while and then you have the meet the parents phase. And that can go well or that can go poorly. Right now in the Indian system, it's just reversed. So the parents pre-approve. You've been pre-approved for your loan. You've already been approved for this credit card. The parents do the pre-approval process, then you go on a series of dates with like 5 or 6 people, 10 people, however many. And then you keep on dating people until you like one. So it's just the steps are reversed. Let's make a biodata. I'm already married, son. Yeah, so the issue is forcing arranged marriages to everyone. Yeah, so that absolutely happens. And I do not agree with forced arranged marriage. Like, that's just, you know. I think that too comes from I just don't think that's really viable anymore. But, you know, there was a time in human history where community kind of mattered way more than the individual. Like, you as an individual had a responsibility. Otherwise, just we wouldn't survive. Like, right. So this was before we had a lot of technology and things like that. So there were like really simple things like in your village of 300. So I was talking to my grandma about this. And so she was kind of telling me that, you know, like the one thing about arranged marriage is that, so what would happen is you'd fall in love with like people in your village, right? But they wouldn't let you marry anyone from your village. You had to go 1 or 2 villages over to find a partner. And why is that? It's because chances are you're like somewhat related to the people in your village, right? Because y'all have been living there for like generations and generations and generations. And there's some like, so like they had this rule where like whoever you got married to had to be from 1 or 2 villages over. That was really the only rule. They just won't let you. And who do you fall in love with? You never meet these people because you don't, you know, the village over is like 20 miles away, which is like a day's travel or something like that. So there were reasons why people had these kinds of rules, and it was just a whole different world. Someone's asking, Dr. K, how do I get a girlfriend and stop being so shy around girls? We should talk about that. Let me think. We've got other posts, though. Okay, we'll talk about shyness maybe at the end. Let me think about it. Anyway. Okay. No, I mean, so that's where like, okay, let's talk about this for a second. So a couple of things to understand. The first is that shyness as a personality characteristic does not correlate with introversion or extroversion. This is very interesting. So shyness also doesn't necessarily correlate with things like anxiety. So a lot of people think that if I'm shy, I'm an introvert. That's actually not true. So you can be a shy extrovert, which can be very painful if you're a shy extrovert, because you're shy, but you really love hanging out with people. So if we understand what shyness is, right? So there's like a couple of different parallel things that we tend to get mixed up. And if you're struggling with shyness, the key thing is to try to unpack what we mean by the word shy. Because some of these things we don't want to change. It's part of who you are, and we love you for it. But part of that stuff can negatively impact things that you want to do. So case in point, I am extremely shy. I'm also an extreme extrovert. So, I mean, introvert. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but like Dr. K, you're streaming on the internet. No, I'm sitting in a room by myself on a weekday, and I don't even see y'all. Y'all are just fictitious in my mind, and nothing helps a shy person so much as imaginary people on the internet, right? It's like imaginary friends is totally fine. So first thing is that let's understand what shyness is. And many people find shyness, especially girls, will find shyness to be cute. Okay. So let's understand what to do about that. So the big problem with shyness, first of all, it's not introverted or extroverted, so you can be either or, okay? Second thing is that oftentimes the problem with shyness is not the shyness, it's the lack of confidence. So someone who is not confident and shy will stay in the corner. Whereas someone who is confident and shy, like, I don't care to speak to or get to know people. It's not for me. And you guys may say, but that's weird. Aren't you a psychiatrist? And like, don't you get to, I love to get to know people in that way. But I detest small talk. Like at a party, like I don't want to hang out with any of these people. But if you're confident, you can, right? So then what ends up happening is I'd say that you need to work on your confidence and don't try to fix the shyness. Because that's sort of fixing a part of, it's a personality characteristic. You don't need to fix that. You need to fix the confidence. So it's not that you should be less shy. It is that you should have the control over yourself to where if you are put in a situation that requires interaction with other human beings, you can do so with full skill and effort. You should not be controlled by your shyness. And that usually involves confidence. So in my case, what I really sort of think about, so here are a couple of tricks to be confident, okay? I mean, I guess it's a trick, but it's not really a trick. The first is spend a little bit of time thinking, how much does this person matter? And chances are you will discover, I know this sounds kind of weird, that this person doesn't matter very much, right? So I'm not saying that human beings don't matter. I'm not trying to be an asshole. But oftentimes when we lack confidence, we think to ourselves that, oh my God, if I screw up this conversation with this person, it's going to be so bad. Why? You're not going to talk to this person again, right? It's like not that big of a deal. There's like 8 billion human beings on the planet. You don't need this one person to like you in this moment. And then people get so caught up about this with like job interviews and dating and whatever, right? There's lots of fish in the sea. There are lots of human beings out there. You don't have to impress this person. That's number one, right? Just think and if you kind of screw it up, you screw it up. I've screwed up many social interactions in my life. And it's like usually people like forget about that kind of stuff. Second thing is that to remember that oftentimes you are a much harsher critic of your behavior than other people are. So they just see your outsides, whereas you are being flogged by your outsides and your insides. Right? So if you're just like quiet and not saying anything, you can be in tons of internal emotional turmoil. Like, oh my God, like I had something to say. Should I jump in? Is it my turn to speak? Because they seem to be talking and I have something good to contribute. But then like 60 or 90 seconds go by and they've started to move on to something else. And now you're like bummed because damn it, I had a good thing to say. And I know that I need a good thing to say to participate in the conversation, but now they've moved past it. And now should I go back to it? That makes things awkward. So then you just sit there. And then you think about that for another 30 seconds. And then you're like, well, now I haven't said anything for a while and I've been awkwardly silent. And so there you are torturing yourself. And the other two people are having a flowing conversation. They're not really paying attention to you. Right? So another thing is that oftentimes when it comes to confidence, our confidence or lack thereof is born of a comparison. But the problem is that the comparisons we make are Frankensteinian monsters. So we don't just compare ourselves to one person with like 10 qualities down the line. What we do is we take our weakest quality and we take the strongest person who has that quality and we can make this comparison. Then we compare to this person's head and this person's feet and this person's career and this person's charisma and this person's money and this person's relationship. And so we look at all these different people and we don't do one-on-one comparisons. We don't look at the person who makes more money than us and we tell ourselves, yeah, but this person is like a complete train wreck when it comes to relationships and they've been divorced twice. We don't think that way. So when it comes to a lack of confidence, be very careful about comparison. And ideally, don't compare at all. You are you. And let other people accept you or reject you based on that. And the last thing is, if you are deficient in some way, improve upon it. Right? But you don't need other people's comparisons to show you that you can be better. You can always be better. And that's what you should lean into. And generally speaking, once you develop confidence and you are shy, then that tends to solve the problem. Because then you can go and you're still shy, but you can interact with people when you need to. How do we develop and grow whilst not comparing a little, though? With practice, right? So comparison exists in our brain to help us grow. That we know that, right? So we make comparisons to pick idealized traits that we then move towards. The problem is that in society today, the signal of comparison. So let's understand this. This is really interesting. So let's talk about how comparison used to be good, but is now harmful. Okay? So, shouldn't you compare yourself a little bit? Yes, you should, but just a little bit. The problem is that it's hard to compare yourself a little bit. So here's how comparison works. Here is a human being. Here is a larger human being. So this human being looks at this human being and says, oh my God, I need to be bigger. So there's a comparison. And then usually when we have a comparison, we induce a negative emotion and motivation. Okay. So like, I feel inferior. I feel guilt. I feel shame usually, right? That's the most common thing, or envy. So if we sort of think about it, this is really important to understand. Let me find you guys this paper. Hold on. We're going to look at a cool paper, chat. What am I looking for? First one right out of the bat. Let me just make sure there's not a better one. Okay, so let's take a look at this paper. Amygdala regulation of the nucleus accumbens dopamine output is governed by the prefrontal cortex. Okay? Now, I know this is kind of an esoteric paper, or weird paper. It sounds technical. So we're going to read one sentence of it, then I'll explain the significance. A dynamic interaction between the prefrontal cortex and the nucleus accumbens may be fundamental to regulation of goal-directed behavior by affective and cognitive processes. Okay? Now, in freely moving rats, microstimulation of basolateral amygdala at intensities that produced mild behavioral activation. Okay? So this is important. Now let's understand what the hell this is talking about. So here's my brain. And I have this little part over here called the nucleus accumbens. And this is where our motivation and goal-directed behavior comes from. And guess what connects to it a lot? This is my amygdala and my limbic system. this is where I experience emotions, especially negative emotions. And this is really strong, has very powerful connections here, and controls our behavior a lot. And then here's our pre-FC, prefrontal cortex. And this guy basically modulates the interaction between these two things. The key thing to understand is, why do we make comparisons? When we make comparisons, it induces a negative emotion, which then goes over to the nucleus accumbens and induces a motivational change. Okay? This is why comparison is good. Now, why is comparison bad nowadays? Because of what happens with our negative emotion. So, if we look at, let's look at negative emotion on the x-axis and motivation on the y-axis. So here's what's kind of interesting. If someone has no negative emotion, their motivation will be relatively low. You can get motivated by other things. And then as negative emotion rises, the motivation actually rises until a critical point, at which point negative emotion leads to basically zero motivation. And what determines this threshold? So when our brains evolved, we evolved with external stimuli and comparisons that would induce this level of motivation. This is what happened, right? So if you kind of think about a tribe of 300 people, how many people in the tribe of 300 are more attractive than you? And how many of those people, how much more attractive are they than you? So if I have a tribe of 300 people, we say there's a bell curve, right? So like 86%, 86.5, right, is going to be somewhere in the middle here. So 7% are going to be over here, and 7% are going to be over here. So that means that most of us are kind of in this middle of the pack. And then there's like a handful of people, like literally 7 out of 100 are going to be like noticeably more attractive. And even then, they're not going to be like, you know, mind-numbingly more attractive than you. So what ends up happening is when someone is like 1 to 2 points higher than you, you make a comparison. This motivates you a little bit by giving you some negative emotion. And then you motivate to change. Maybe I should be more like that person. Now, in our current day, when you look at faces, I know this sounds kind of weird, but just think about how many faces you see every day. What is the average attractiveness of those faces? So I would venture that probably human beings see between 50 and 100 faces a day today. And where do we see the majority of these faces? I venture that 80% of them are on the internet. Right? So if you spend like half an hour on TikTok, you will see 50 people's faces. And now, let's think about this, right? Because if you're spending time on social media, what is the average attractiveness of the face? It is very high. Because now what we're doing is we're taking about 4 billion people, and we are taking the most attractive 1%, and those are going to be the faces that you see. So now what goes on is, if you look at 86.5, what's one standard deviation of attractiveness when you're using the internet? It's like, you know, let's say an 8.5 is the middle of the bell curve. And then the majority of the population is actually over here, but you feel like you're over here. And so now what's happened is we've created a comparison between an average of an 8.5 and a 5. And you think this is average. And you're just a 5. You're actually average. But this is a 3.5 delta. Whereas before, we had like a 1-point delta. And now what started to happen is we start to get a large negative emotion, which then tips us past this threshold and our motivation tanks. So comparison used to be good. And now, because of the nature of comparison, it is bad. And people are saying that I'm in the top 1%. I mean, I don't think that that's true. So I tend to make up for it, right? I'm not on social media because I'm pretty. I'm on social media because theoretically I am helpful or entertaining. Do y'all get that? Like, seriously, like, understanding statistics, like if I had my way in school, I would teach every child statistics. There is so much misinformation in the world right now, and the number one thing that combats misinformation is statistical analysis. Right? So once someone understands, okay, what is the sample size of what I'm seeing? Everyone is whatever. Everyone is, who is everyone? How do you know what everyone is doing? There's 8 billion people on the planet. How many of them are doing what you're talking about? Everyone is looks maxing right now. What does that mean? Like, so this is where I'd encourage y'all to, like, the next time you're at an airport, hopefully you get to go to an airport from time to time. Just look at everyone and see what people are doing. And even that is a subset of the population that gets to travel by air. Okay? All right. Okay. Let's keep going. Before we keep going, I just want to ask y'all, do y'all get this business? So this is important. This business, I know this paper sounds weird. Okay. But this is important. This is really important to understand. If you guys are having trouble with your motivation, like, negative emotions have a huge part of it. Okay. We've got a video coming out about dopamine resistance soon. So this is going to be a video about all of the things. So if you can't control, I guess we're about to talk about porn addiction, so this is important to understand. So if you can't control your behavior and you are addicted to something dopaminergic, the problem is that the dopaminergic circuit in the brain is what creates motivation. This is why all of the stuff we're addicted to is dopaminergic. Why isn't all the stuff we're addicted to oxytocinergic or serotonergic or opioidnergic, right? Why is it that all of our addictive substances are dopaminergic? Because dopamine is the one signal that is primary in our motivational circuitry. So if you can't control, because that's where your motivation comes from. So the real challenge about things like porn addiction is you are not motivated to actually fix it. And you may say, but hold on, Dr. K, I want to fix it. But let's understand this. Wanting up here and what your body and your brain is motivated towards are two different things. I want to have a six-pack, but I want to drink a six-pack. Y'all understand the difference? So your motivational circuitry is not thinking. Big misunderstanding. Our capacity for thought and logic comes from our cerebral cortices. These are the parts that make us human. Our motivation, unga bunga smash, is where our motivation comes from. It's a completely different circuit. And a lot of people get confused by this because they get addicted to pornography and they're like, porn is destroying my life. Porn is destroying, I can't stop. That's because your motivational circuitry is attracted to it. So you're consciously, you may look at that. You're like some pilot that is sitting in a cloud and looking at all the primitives in your brain that are attracted to breasts and penises and whatever. And you're like, this is a mess. Like, what do I do? Because the motivational circuitry doesn't care. The other problem that we see with pornography addiction is as you fall further into pornography addiction, what ends up happening, hold on, let me show this. Okay, so here's the other problem. Here's why you can't control porn addiction. All right, let's look at this. The other problem with controlling porn addiction, all right, so problem number one that we just discussed is that this is where your thoughts come from. Okay, or actually, let me just start from scratch. Okay, let's do this again. Why you can't control porn addiction in a nutshell. So here's my brain. Here's my nucleus accumbens. Here is my amygdala and limbic system. Okay, so here's the paper that we just looked at. Amygdala regulation of the nucleus accumbens dopamine output is governed by the prefrontal cortex. Okay. So what this means, this is negative emotions, is over here. Dopamine, pleasure, behavioral enforcement, and motivation come from here. And what we know is that this part of the brain controls this part of the brain. Okay? And then we know that our prefrontal cortex is over here. Now, this is the controlling, this is what makes us human. Our cerebral cortices is where thought comes from, logic comes from. And then here is the primitive brain down here. So the first thing is that you can say to yourself, okay, I want to stop pornography. You look at it and you think logically, you have thoughts. I want to stop. But I want to stop is just a thought. It's coming from the top half of your brain. It's not coming from here. The hunger for porn, the actual motivation, which correlates almost like a hunger, comes from down here. And that's because porn gives us dopamine. All right, so it directly activates your motivational circuitry. That's why we're so addicted to dopaminergic stuff instead of oxytonergic or serotonergic or whatever. Adrenergic, noradrenergic, right? So like all of those other hormones, neurotransmitters, our brain, we don't get addicted to that stuff. We get addicted. This is the good stuff. Dopamine. Yummy. So wanting to stop comes from up here, but that's not real motivation. It is a thought. It is an idea. So that's why it's different. Thinking you want to stop porn and wanting to stop porn is different. So now the second thing that we need to understand is that when it comes to pornography addiction, remember this, the negative emotional circuitry controls the nucleus accumbens. So when we're stuck in a cycle of porn and we feel ashamed of ourselves, when we feel shame, guilt, what else? Bored. All of these are negative emotions. These are going to amplify this, which will amplify this, which will cause us to go into porn. Okay? So thinking about wanting to stop porn addiction doesn't work. The more negative emotional circuitry, the more negative emotions we pile up, the more we become dependent on porn. Because this is your brain's way of balancing the negative emotions. The other thing that's very important to understand about pornography is one of the variables that correlates the most with pornography is meaninglessness. And this is the way that I understand this. So if you look at logistic regression or multivariate analyses on porn addiction. So what does that mean? If we take 100 people who are addicted to porn and we ask them, we do like a personality assessment, we do a psychological assessment, what are the variables that float to the top? So we'll ask them, are you depressed? Are you anxious? Are you whatever? Were you abused growing up? Were your parents divorced? We'll ask 1,000 questions. And one of the top two things that comes up is meaninglessness. And here's the way that I understand it. So then I worked with some porn addicts, right? When I work with porn addicts, this is what I discover. You have to have a reason to not watch porn in order to not watch porn. You got to have something in your life. The people that are the most addicted to pornography usually have some kind of profound emptiness in their life. And sometimes we'll see people who are like, sometimes this is like, I'm 25 years old, I sit at home, I'm unemployed, I have no friends, whatever. Sometimes it's someone who's really like, got nothing for them in life. But you'd be amazed at what percentage of people are financially successful, professionally successful, in relationships, but there's usually something missing. And so overcoming this addiction involves a couple of different steps. The first is it involves finding that meaning, because you have to have a reason to not stop. And your partner being mad at you is sometimes not sufficient. And why is that? So if y'all have been paying attention, okay, let's look one last time. When my partner is mad at me for watching pornography, what do you think that does to my brain, chat? Who can guess? What happens when my partner is pissed? I gotta see if I can. There. Makes me feel negative. Beautiful. Brilliant. Y'all get it. So that when your partner gets mad at you, this fuels that, which just fuels the whole cycle. Right? And this is why people, like, when your partner pressures you to stop watching porn, you usually do it for a while. So there's a time while your frontal lobes are inhibiting the circuit, but one day they fall short. One day you're exhausted. One day you didn't get a full night's sleep. One day you had something else go bad in your life. Some negative event happened. And then it's too much, and your frontal lobes aren't able to compensate, and then you relapse. And then your partner gets very confused because they're like, I thought you had this under control. And then they lose trust in you. You lose trust in yourself. You're really confused. You did it well for so well, but now they're even more pissed at you. You start to get hopeless. Everything just fuels the pornography. And why is that? It's because when it comes to pornography, sex is such a vital part of human evolution that it affects every part of our brain. And sex is so powerful. Remember, the desire to procreate is so powerful that we basically shut everything else off. All of our negative emotions go away. It's highly dopaminergic. Even yogis in ancient India will say that one of the easiest ways to enter brief samadhi is orgasm. Right? So samadhi is temporary enlightenment. The moment of orgasm is blissful. Right? So it's such a powerful thing. And this is what we get addicted to. Now let's talk about pornography for a second specifically. So anytime there's a beautiful experiment that happened with beetles and green glass bottles. So what a group of researchers noticed is that there's a group of beetles, a certain kind of beetle, that were humping and trying to procreate with green glass bottles. And people got really confused, and they were like, why are all these beetles, like this beetle population is dying because instead of having sex with each other, they're having sex with the green glass bottles. And so the researchers started studying this, and what they discovered is that when you have something called a supranormal stimulus, it activates our sexual circuitry in the brain, and we gravitate towards it very, very powerfully. Okay? And so if you look at pornography, what does pornography do? It is a supranormal stimulus. It's not normal breasts. It's not a normal penis. It's not normal colors with normal looking people. Everything is amplified. Everything is artificial. Everything is bigger. Everything is brighter. The color saturation is jacked up, right? Everything is more intense. There are more people involved. So it's a supranormal stimulus that then activates the circuitry more intensely. And as it activates the circuitry more intensely, we get more dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens. We get more emotional suppression. And what you tend to see in people who are addicted to pornography is that over time, they will gravitate towards harder and hardcore porn, right? Because that supernormal stimulus then becomes a normal stimulus. And then what'll happen is you require that supernormal stimulus to get that same level of dopamine, to get that same level of emotional suppression. So you need it to be more hardcore. Okay? Questions? Okay. While we're waiting for questions, y'all can ask. I'll keep track of them, okay? So let's take a quick look at this post. How long does it take to recover from a porn addiction? It's kind of embarrassing. So I won't elaborate too much, but it feels like it taking way too long. Addiction, and it feels impossible. How long does it take to beat a porn addiction? I know this might sound a bit too vague, but I would appreciate it a lot if you guys would help me, especially those who have beaten the addiction. Maybe I'm asking too much, but if you guys could potentially give me tips. Okay. Says Johnny Sins fanboy. Okay. So let's talk about beating an addiction. So the first thing you've got to understand is that an addiction is not, you can't beat an addiction. So if you even like use that terminology, right? So this implies that there is an opponent, and once the opponent is vanquished, it is dead forever. I have won, the game is over. That's not how addictions work. So addictions are things that are with you all the time. You never win. You just win the battle today. You can't ever really win the war. I mean, you can. We'll get to that later, but so that's the first thing, is that this is where a biggest mistake that so many people make with pornography addiction is that they try to beat it. How do I vanquish it? And why is that? It's because people are tired of dealing with it. So the desire to beat it comes out of a fantasy of no longer wanting to fight it every day. Really a problem. Working as an addiction psychiatrist, the worst thing that I want is a patient who thinks they have beaten their addiction. Because that's when the addiction really trips you up. Your guard is down now that you've won. It is people who have constant vigilance until certain neuroscientific changes are made, that's really when you can conquer it. But for now, don't try to beat it. Try to resist. So how do you do that? How long does it take to beat a porn addiction? So that too depends on how many factors are there that are driving you towards porn and how many factors are driving you away from porn. So for example, if you use pornography as an antidote to boredom, as long as you are bored, you will have an interest in pornography. As long as you use pornography as an emotional regulation technique, as long as your emotions are disturbed, you will lean towards pornography. So this is where what we really need to do is understand, okay, there's a dopaminergic signal, there's an emotional signal, there's an emotionally suppression signal, and then there's a component of just like, the brain is like, if we're not doing anything today, let me at least get that hit of dopamine, right? That's how it thinks. So really overcoming pornography addiction is not in addressing the addiction directly, which there is a part of that. It's really in understanding what are all the risk factors that are contributing to the pornography addiction. And that's what we try to do when we do addiction psychiatry. So there's the substance itself. Let's use an example of alcohol. There's the whole act of not taking a drink. But then there is also what goes into that, which is, okay, let's do psychotherapy to understand why you started drinking in the first place. Let's understand what your triggers are. Let's understand like all of the para-alcoholic behavior. And the problem that I see with a lot of people who struggle with pornography addiction is that, first of all, a lot of clinicians don't specialize in it. They don't really understand how it works. And secondly, they don't fix all of the environment, right? So for example, a big part of overcoming alcohol addiction is changing your community. So if you go hang out with your friends who go to the bar, or you go hang out with your friends who are part of a frat, you're going to drink. So you have to find new friends. But what's the community of pornography? The community of pornography is loneliness. So it's very difficult. You can tell an alcoholic not to go to a bar. It is far harder to tell a pornography addict to no longer be lonely. This is why pornography addiction is skyrocketing. Sure, things are getting more into the supernormal stimulus realm, but really it's that what's the community of pornography? It's loneliness. And so when I really see good outcomes with people who overcome pornography addiction, they have more meaning in their lives and they have more community. But that's very difficult to do. So what is the bar of pornography? Right? So the bar is the physical location that you go to drink. Where do you watch pornography and where do you masturbate? Usually at home, right? Those of the people that don't do it at home are the ones who wind up on sex offender registries, wind up in jail, those kinds of things. And so how do you get away from your house? This is why pornography addiction is so bad today. Ease of access, ubiquitous. supernormal stimulus, emotionally unregulated population. So what we're doing is our brains, we're getting worse and worse at emotional regulation. You see this with all the Karens on the internet. You see it with people posting all this toxic stuff, this misogyny and all this kind of stuff. Every corner of the internet is filled with just negative emotion. And then you have safe spaces that are just venting, just vomiting all of this negative emotion constantly. And so the world is becoming more emotionally dysregulated. And so what is our silver bullet? What is the brain's silver bullet when it comes to emotional regulation? Pornography. Right? It's not a controlled substance, so I don't have to get someone to prescribe it for me. It's not illegal, so I don't have to like hang out with a drug dealer. It doesn't cost me my rent, usually. There's a whole other aspect of like OnlyFans and parasocial relationships that we're not going to get into. So imagine if like heroin was like freely available on the internet and you don't have to pay for it. Right? What would use be like? Just everyone had all the equipment in their own homes. So if you look at any addictive substance, it gives pleasure and it takes away pain. And porn does that very well, right? Porn is the one addiction that accesses the one part of our brain, not the one part of our brain, the one function that accesses all parts of our brain. I'll give you all an example of this. So I was trying to figure out, trying to show you all this paper, but I have to find it. Let's see. Whoop. Yeah, I want to open 20 tabs. Nope. 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 Give me a second, chat. No, this looks like it's the wrong. Okay, couldn't find it. I'll try to find it later. Oh, maybe it's an older. No, these are all. Oh, here we go. Oh, I found it. Hey, I found it. Hold on, chat. Okay. Hey, here we go. Okay, so here's the other thing to understand. Why is pornography so damn addicting? Neuroanatomy and function of human sexual behavior are neglected or known issue. So I was trying to figure out, I tried to look at like, okay, what part of the brain does pornography affect? Okay. Sexual behavior is regulated by both subcortical structures, such as the hypothalamus, brainstem, spinal cord, and several cortical brain areas, acting as an orchestra to finally adjust this primitive, complex, and versatile behavior. Mwah. Chef's kiss of neuroscience. Okay, now let's just look. Table 1, summary of the brain areas involved in human sexual behavior. Basically all of them. The reward system. Okay, like basically your whole brain. Wait, it gets better. Neurotransmitters and modulators. Summary of the main neurotransmitters and modulators involved in regulating human sexual behavior. Basically all of them. Okay? Let's see if yeah. So it's like, what does pornography addiction affect? The whole brain. All of the neurotransmitters. And this is why it's so hard to see, like, for example, when we look at alcohol addiction, we literally have pills you can take for alcohol addiction. Things like naltrexone. And what naltrexone does is it goes to the area where the alcohol binds to a receptor in your brain and it blocks that binding. So we can literally give you a pill that will block the effect of alcohol in the brain. We also have medications like disulfiram. So disulfiram is a devious medication. So when we drink alcohol, there are 2 steps in the metabolism of alcohol. I think we turn it first into an acetaldehyde or something like that, and then we turn it into whatever the final product is. So the interesting thing is that alcohol, that middle step, so it gets turned in from A to B and B to C. Okay? A is okay, C is okay. But B is toxic as fuck. So we give a medication that blocks the conversion from B to C. And then this metabolite builds up and makes people violently ill. So if you take your disulfiram pill and you drink alcohol, you will be violently ill. So that we can do this when it comes to a substance. We can literally give you a pill that will make you ill if you drink alcohol. But when it comes to pornography, it affects the whole brain, all of the neurotransmitters. And so it's hard to fix it just like this. And that's why the treatment overcoming pornography addiction is so much more holistic, right? It involves emotional regulation, finding purpose, finding meaning, hopefully having a healthy sexual relationship. And another thing that we understand about pornography is that it's not even about sex. It's not about relationships or lust or anything like that. Many of the people I've worked with pornography addiction, I don't know about the majority, usually get exposed to pornography pre-puberty. So even before their brain knows, they're not aroused by it at all. They get this supranormal stimulus in their developing brains, which then shapes their brain to be vulnerable to pornography later in life. And we know, for example, that marijuana is a gateway drug. Why is it a gateway drug? Because it alters the parts of our brain that then become more vulnerable to addiction. So it alters the structure of our reward circuitry. And once you alter the structure of your reward circuitry, now you can have a huge vulnerability to addiction, which is what we see in marijuana in developing brains. And so with pornography, this is what tends to happen. I've noticed that the younger you are when you get exposed to pornography, it appears that the higher the risk is, although I don't have data to back that up. That's just clinical practice. Okay? So Taber Nusel is saying, I feel like I'm doomed. Okay, so here's the thing to understand. You're not doomed. Okay? But fixing a pornography addiction, in my opinion, for a fair number of people, okay, so this isn't an absolute, involves fixing your life. So in a sense, it is solvable. And some people get really upset by that. They're like, I have to fix my whole life? Sort of, yeah. On the flip side, fixing pornography addiction as your main quest in life will necessitate that all of the things that everybody else is doing as a main quest become side quests. Now they become boxes to check that you need to do in order to fix the pornography addiction. Find meaning, find purpose, build a career, get physically healthy, go to the gym. So as you chase this insurmountable goal, every other part of your life will fall in order because that's what it takes to overcome. And so it's actually really interesting because I've seen people with pornography addiction, the process of overcoming their addiction means that they square away every corner of their life. There's also a karmic perspective that sometimes I've had discussions with my patients about because I'll ask them about this kind of stuff, right? Because it's about meaning. So why do you think you were given this addiction? And they'll kind of say that until I really fixed every corner of my life, it always came back. It was a signal to me from the universe that I'm not living my life in the right way. And then once I started living my life the right way, the pornography addiction got fixed. Literally, these are my patient's words, not mine. And then even if I did it 80%, I would relapse. So I needed to really give it 100%. And then they'll tell me the weirdest thing. Pornography addiction is the best thing that ever happened to me. And now I understand this because, and I'll ask them, well, what makes you feel that way? Help me understand how you arrived at that conclusion. And he's like, this has really made me realize what I appreciate about life and how important these things are and what kind of life I want to live. Right? There's all this dopaminergic emotional regulation crap, which is a false life. It's not a real life. It's an empty life. And then in the process of getting rid of that, I've had to build relationships. I've had to be comfortable in my body. I've had to do all kinds of other things. Right? So we have a guide. Someone's saying that this reminds me of my trauma. So this is a huge perspective that's very important for trauma. We've done lectures and stuff on post-traumatic growth, which y'all can check out. We have a guide coming up. I guess I'm spoiling it, sort of. So I just finished filming a guide where we dig into all this kind of more spiritual stuff. Yeah, so have higher expectations from their partners. Absolutely, man. So I think that the whole partner thing is so complicated. Okay. Yeah, I'll try to fix my audio. It's because I scooted back. It's a very sensitive mic. Thanks for that feedback. Okay. All right, let's look at other stuff. So, I'm shamelessly stealing characteristics of people I want to be like. Is it bad? Analyzing my favorite characters so I can shamelessly steal their personalities. Okay. So, I don't think this is bad. And let's understand why. So if you look at other people's personality characteristics and you start stealing them, I think that's good. That's totally fine. Even if they're fictional, doesn't matter. In order for this to be harmful or helpful, we have to understand the difference between personality and identity. So if you're adopting other people's personality characteristics and it is not becoming a part of your identity, then this is great. If you are confounding the two, then we have a problem. So now a lot of people may wonder, what is the difference between personality and identity? So we have good science on this, okay? So personality is who you are, and identity is who you think you are. And it's fine for you to craft yourself into whoever you are. That's totally fine. But don't pretend you're that. I know it's kind of confusing, so I'll explain. So in science, in basically psychological research, we've defined what personality is. And what personality is the way that you interpret information, what your internal reaction is, followed by what your actions are. So if we look at people with two different personalities, let's say I'm going for a hike with my friend and we see a bear. So I get excited because I watched this TikTok earlier of people like petting bears in the woods. And I was like, wow, what an amazing opportunity. I want to be one with nature. They're so beautiful. They're such majestic creatures. And so I walk towards the bear, hoping to pet it. And my friend starts shitting themselves. So we look at this situation. The situation is exactly the same, right? For both of us, we're two people going on a hike. The circumstances are exactly the same. The weather's the same. The bear is the same. Bear's the same size. Bear's the same color. The situation is exactly the same. The personality determines how I interpret this information, how I react to it, excitement versus fear, and how I act, walk towards it versus walk away. So you can take this for any number of things. Let's say like you go to your school dance and you're 16 years old. Or you go to a party. Are you in the corner? So we're at a party there. I don't know anyone here. This is a fact of the matter. Depending on my personality, this can be very exciting. I don't know anyone here. Let's meet new people. Or this can be very exciting. I don't know anyone here. No one knows my shitty reputation. Time to fuck up other people's lives. Or I don't know anyone here. I feel very awkward. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know how to start a conversation. So the circumstances can be exactly the same. The way that we interpret that information, the way that we internally react to it, and the way that we end up acting determines our personality. Now notice in these scenarios, there's no sense of I, right? So when I see this bear in the woods, I get excited about the bear, but I don't think to myself, I am a bear lover. I'm a this, I am a that. This is who I am. You don't think about that. It is the way that you react, interpret information, your internal reaction, and how you act. It has nothing to do with your identity. Y'all get that? If you really pay attention to the examples that I provided, there's no sense of I. So in that way, if you look at someone's personality, the way that they interpret information, the way that they internally react, and the way that they act in a circumstance, by all means, adopt someone else's personality. This is actually healthy in some ways, right? So when you have figures that you're inspired by, like parents, there are times in your life where if you're lucky and you've got a good set of parents, you will adopt their personality characteristics because your parents will help you do that. That's literally their job. So you'll have a setback in life. You asked your crush out and they said no. And then you feel devastated. Your interpretation of them saying no, or they don't even say no, they say, I'm not looking to date right now, which you view as 100% rejection. That's just something they're telling you to spare your feelings. But you know that deep down, they don't want anything to do with you. Ignore what they said because they're liars. And then you internally react. That's your internal reaction. And then you act, I'm never going to ask anyone out again. So your parent comes along and tries to shape your personality. Let's reinterpret the information. What did they actually say? Oh, they said they're not looking to date right now. How do you know that they don't like you? Now, I want to ask you a question. I'm just curious. Let's say that they did like you, but that their life is chaotic. What would they say to you if they really liked you but could not date you? Interesting. They may not say no. They may say, I can't date right now, or I'm not looking to date right now. Oh, interesting. So there's a different interpretation that could be true. So change your interpretation. What's your internal reaction? So you start to get very upset. Let's learn some emotional regulation techniques. Let's go for a walk. Let's talk about life. Right? So change your internal reaction, observe your internal reaction, and then change your action. I'm never going to ask anyone out again. Right? So let's change that. So by all means, adopt someone else's personality. Right? So take characteristics, break them down into those 3 pieces, and then if that's what you want to be in your life, you can do it. Go for it. The problem is adopting someone else's identity. Okay? This is a completely different thing. If you start to think of your personality as identity, then that is cringe. Okay? So let's understand this. Let's say that you are really good with people. And the moment you start, that's great. It's wonderful. You're extroverted, you're charismatic, you're social, fine. All of those things. Wonderful. The moment that you think, if you want to understand what cringe is, you can take someone who's very charismatic. What makes them cringe? Identifying as charismatic. I'm the most charismatic person in the world. Look at me. I'm so charismatic. I'm so sexy. You want me. You need me. That becomes cringe. Anything, when we identify with it, becomes cringe. Let's say I'm sad and I'm depressed. Right? This is something that deserves compassion. It deserves help. It deserves support. Doesn't make you weak or anything like that. Sometimes depression happens to people. So be it. Some people make it their identity. I've had them as patients, right? That becomes cringe. I am depressed. I can never get better. I can never get better. We still deserve, I think we should give them compassion and stuff, right? That's what we do. You're going to love video games, but if you become a gamer, right? I'm a gamer. Oh, those aren't real games. A real gamer plays these games. That's cringe. So the moment that personality becomes identity, we've entered the realm of cringe. Even something as simple as, but what about other qualities like humility? Oh my God, the most cringe of all of these is identity based on humility. Being humble is fantastic. If your personality is one who's humble, okay, like I'm not entitled to anything. I don't interpret that I bought a lottery ticket. I have a 1 in a billion chance that I'm going to win. This is how it is. Being humble is wonderful. Having an identity is humble. I saw this so much in the ashram. Look at how humble I am. Look at how spiritual. I used to be like that. Arguably, I'm still like that, and still I haven't figured it out yet. I'm sure a year from now I'll figure out that there's some part of my identity that is cringe. Look at how humble I am. Everyone else is arrogant, but I'm so humble. It's like not like the other boys or not like the other girls, right? Like I look at me, like I'm so different. Cringe. So if you, seriously, if you want someone else's personality, go for it. Right? But let's understand what personality is. It is the way you interpret information. By all means, interpret information in a more optimistic and a healthier way. Go for it. Right? If you're looking, because I was looking at this and I see all these like anime characters, right? And like, that's cool. Like, I think you could take characteristics from anime and try to be more like those people. Like, fine. Hopefully not the cringe ones. Right? So if you, and that's what human beings are like. We talked a little bit about comparison earlier. And like, that's part of it. You compare yourself to other people, like your parents, and we are wired to adopt some of those behaviors. This is why peer pressure is a thing, because our brain is wired to adopt what other people do. This is healthy. Just don't get it confused with your identity. And by all means, change the way that you interpret information. Interpret information in a better way, whether that's more skepticism or less skepticism. Whatever, right? Depends on the person, depends on who you're looking up to, depends on the change you need to make. Change the way that you react to things, by all means. React to something like a hero in an anime where when they're disadvantaged, instead of giving up and jerking off for a week, they decide to actually like give it a shot even if they could lose. Go for it. Right? Go for it. Be more compassionate and accepting of people's quirks, because that's a personality characteristic you see someone have in a fictional universe. Go for it. Just don't let it cross the boundary into identity. And if we actually see it, a lot of these people who are like super into anime, right? The reason that they're so cringe is because they adopt it as an identity, not as a personality. Y'all get it? Does it make sense? What are good identity characteristics? We've got a lecture coming up on that Wednesday, but we're doing deep dive in, I won't go into more detail, but let's take a look at identity. Okay. We have a post, so we'll talk about a little bit about it now. Okay. Why does everyone talk about the ego as if they're not the ego that's doing the talking? Everyone seems to refer to the ego as if it's separate from the one typing or talking. Just as a thought arises, so do these words I'm typing, as well as the words I speak. It's like everyone is trying to transcend this voice in their head or whatever, but the voice in the head is what's creating these words I type, as well as the words I speak. Do people understand this, or have they just created a superego that thinks it's separate from the thoughts and words when reflecting upon what they've seen? When explaining to me, it seems as if the program has realized it's a program, but other people seem to think that the words they write and say are not coming from thought/ego. I'm not referring to the awareness or consciousness that's observing all of this, just referring to the seemingly large number of people who think they're not an ego when communicating. Okay. So, if you are confused because everyone's talking about ego, but isn't it just the ego that's doing the talking? No, it's not. So if y'all want to understand this, it's very simple, okay? Maybe it's confusing, but I think it's relatively simple. The first is that thoughts and ego are not the same. So we're going to use a lot of Sanskrit here because I think Sanskrit is a very, very sophisticated language. And we run into this problem here with English because English does not have the language to specify these differences. So the first thing is that this person says thought/ego, which implies that thoughts and ego are the same thing, right? So if you're using good/right, like that implies that, and this is precisely this person's problem, according to me, is that they haven't understood that the mind has different parts and that different parts can observe and act on each other. So let's understand that. Okay? So we're going to use the Sanskrit phrase antakarana. So antakarana is oftentimes translated as the mind, but man is mind such an unsophisticated representation of it. So antakarana literally means internal instrument, and that is the best definition. So if we look at our lives, okay, there is this physical body. We have hands, we have eyes, we have nose, and all of these things are designed to interact with the outside world. So I can pick up a pen. So that the hand is really interesting because it is a sensory organ and it is an organ of action. I can affect a willpower change in the external world with my hands, and I can get information from the outside world with my hands. The whole body is an external instrument. I can taste things from the outside. My body will let me know whether this is healthy or unhealthy because I'll get sick or I'll feel good after I eat something. So we have this instrument that allows us to connect with the external. And then we have this instrument that is internal. This is the antakarana. This is the mind. Now let's understand. So much like the body has hands, feet, eyes, nose, we have 5 senses. We have many organs of action, right? We can do things with our feet. We can do things with our hands. We can do things with our voice. We can affect change in the outside world with many instruments that are part of the body. So what are the parts of the antakarana, the internal instrument? So the first question is thoughts and ego, because this is what this person is confused about. So can I think without having an ego? Absolutely. Right? So if we look at what is the ego is the sense of I. So an ego is something that's me, mine. That's what ego is. So even in the West and the East, we kind of agree that there is a quality of possessiveness. There's a quality of me-ness. There's a quality of I-ness. We know there's this part of the brain called the default mode network, which is probably where this part of the I-ness lives. We also know that the me has a spatial location. So I know this sounds kind of weird, but you, the you-ness of you exists somewhere over here. You're not in a different room right now. You're where you are, right? And that sounds kind of weird, but we also know that you can electrically stimulate the temporoparietal junction of the brain, and you can trigger an out-of-body experience. You can have an I that is outside of the physical location of your body. So there's a certain I-ness. So you can, the function of thought is separate from the function of ego. So ego is identity. It's like who I am, okay? In Sanskrit, we have the word ahamkara, which means the sense of I, or I-ness. But you can think about things without ego. It is you that's doing the thinking, yes, but you're not thinking in terms of ego. Like, I can just drink this water. There's no ego involved in that, right? I'm just drinking water. And you can say, but you're saying you're drinking water. But yeah, but that could be unconscious too. I could just drink the water. So we have thoughts, we have emotions, and then we have, so emotions are different from thoughts, right? So they're feelings. Those things are different. Those are 2 different parts of the mind, 2 different parts of the antakarana. And then we have the ego. So the ego is anytime you have an I statement, that is the ego. So I am good at this, I am good at that. That requires a judgment of an identity compound. Anytime we make a comparison, it involves the ego. Because I cannot say that you are taller or shorter without me being taller or shorter. So you can make comparisons to non-people, that's not ego. But anytime you make a comparison to someone else, that involves the ego. Because you can't say that you're taller or shorter unless you have an identity. And so the ego is a part of the mind. It can be observed just like your thoughts, just like your emotions. You can notice the function of ego. It's trickier, it's subtler. But you can even notice any I statement that you make is a thought, right? And it's being sort of run by the ego. And then we know that we can exist with egoless states. So a really good example of an egoless state is if you ever jump into a body of water that is a little bit cold. For a moment, you're just pure existence. You're not fat or thin. You're not silly or smart. You're not successful or a failure. You're not poor or rich. For a moment, you're just jump into the water and then you exist fully in that moment. You're not paying attention. You're not thinking about video games or distracted or anything like that. You're fully present right there for just a flash of a second, but you have no sense of identity. If you really pay attention, you'll find this. And so this is the ego. And it's not the same as thought. It's not the same as emotion. And then we sort of get to this ultimate idea, which the person kind of alludes to in their post, right? Which is, I'm not referring to the awareness or consciousness that's observing this. That's what's ultimately at the end of it. Okay? Is that there is a consciousness, the act of witness, observation, or experience is ultimately like what's even beyond the antakarana. So the antakarana, or the internal instrument, or the mind, has thoughts, it has emotions, it has ego, has two other things, some scars, like memories, and it's got a location of sorts called the chitta. It's got a space where all these things interact. And then beyond that is pure consciousness. And so when this person says, it seems to me as if the program has realized it's a program. It's not the program that realizes it's a program. It's the consciousness that realizes that there is a program running. So you have a witnessing capability which can witness your thoughts, can witness your emotions, and can witness your ego. But the witnesser itself doesn't have any ego qualities because it is just the screen on which everything else is projected. Right? So I don't know if this makes sense, but like, you can have a lot of pixels on the screen, but the TV itself doesn't change. Everything, all of the images that are projected on the screen can change a lot. Your thoughts can change, your emotions can change, but that which experiences has never changed. That's the you. Your body has changed, your mind has changed, but you have not changed. What makes you you? Your personality has changed. What makes you you is you're the one who experiences every moment of your life. This is why it's so hard for other people to understand you, because they don't experience the other parts of your life. Right? If everyone could share experiences, everyone would understand each other. The whole challenge in life is you're the only one that experiences your life. And yet you are always experiencing it. You don't get a break from it for even a moment. This quality of experience is the most fundamental thing, and that is what observes the ego. It isn't the ego observing the ego. And there's a very simple way to understand this. So when someone is behaving egotistically, do they know they are behaving egotistically? Not at all. Y'all get that? The more of their head that someone has up their ass, the less aware they are. The ego dominates the mind. It dominates the antakarana. And as it dominates the antakarana, you lose awareness. Narcissists don't know they're narcissists. That's the whole problem. How do you demolish narcissism? You raise awareness. As they become more aware, the narcissism reduces. Literally. If we look at things like dialectical behavioral therapy, which is regarded by many as the best evidence-based treatment for borderline personality disorder, which is a cluster B personality disorder. And the cluster B personality disorders also include narcissism. So what do BPD and narcissism share? They share a very unhealthy ego. That's the root of it. Unhealthy in different ways. And so mindfulness helps both. So the more we move away from the ego, the more that the symptoms of these clinical illnesses improve. And so ego doesn't observe itself. Okay, and now if y'all are really paying attention, some of y'all may ask the question, okay, but what is it? So if the witness or the experiencer can observe the ego, what is it that observes the witness? And the cool thing is people may say, is there a witnesser beyond witnesser? Right, so I witness my life, but is there something beyond that? Is there something beyond that? Is it basically like turtles all the way down? And the answer is no. There is an end of the road. And the witnesser is the end of the road, but you can't understand that until you get really good at looking beyond the antakarana to your awareness, until you learn how to move past emotions, thoughts, and ego to what is experiencer. And then you try to look beyond that. You can keep looking, and then you'll find the answer. It makes sense once you find it. right? There's just one. It's not like the TV is pixels on another TV, which is pixels on another TV, right? So we can even do this. Like, this is cool. Let's do it, chat. Right? So this is what it kind of looks like. But no, it isn't infinitely regressive. Thankfully. So in the way that we know that is because if you actually get rid of the antakarana, if you stop all thoughts, all emotions, and all ego, and you are just witnessing in a raw way, there's nothing beyond it. That's full. It feels complete. You have to experience it. But by all means, go looking for something beyond ego and, beyond the witnesser, and prove me wrong. Go for it. Right? This is just, once again, the ego of me. Oh my God, my experiences must be generalized to everybody. I could be wrong. I could be an idiot. In fact, I am an idiot. So check it out for yourselves. I feel like I am not in control of the witness, though. Yeah, that's right. You are not in control of the witness. The witness is in control of you. The witness is uncontrollable and can arguably exert some control, but generally speaking, the witness is independent of the axis of control. Yeah, so some people are saying this is eye-opening. Some people are saying I didn't understand a single thing. Totally fine. Either way, totally fine. Right? So the challenge that I face is that as we talk about things, we can talk about more advanced things or we can talk about earlier things. And it's not that advanced is better than earlier, right? It's just where people are on their journey. So if you you're not stupid if you didn't go to school and learn any mathematics until you were 13. It's not a reflection on you as a person. It's just, have you been exposed to the earlier steps of this conversation or not? Can there be ego without comparison? Yes. But there cannot be comparison without ego, or comparison of people. You can compare two objects. Like, you can compare a rock as larger or smaller without ego. So someone's asking about, could you tell us the differences between an ADHD brain reacting to weed and how neurotypical people react to weed? I think we've done that before. So part of the reason that, so I know that we have a lot of new people in our community, which is great, right? So we're growing. Cool. And part of the challenge we face is how much do we repeat things that we've covered before versus cover new things? So what I would say is, if y'all are interested in ADHD, we have a guide on it for a reason, right? So instead of watching 300 random ass hours of streams where Dr. K randomly talks about ADHD here and there, we've got certain things that are start to finish, like the guide to ADHD. And then we also have specifically a video or a stream where we talked about addiction and ADHD, I'm pretty sure. So y'all can just Google that. And I think that's the time that we have for today. Let me see what else. We had one more. No, meditation bringing up anger and disgust. It's 2:30. Okay, we can go. One more, chat? We'll try to make it a little bit faster, okay? Maybe not. Who knows? So since we're talking about meditation. Meditation bringing up anger and disgust towards my father. I am a Buddhist, 27F, and have been practicing shamatha, I don't know if that's pronounced right, meditation for at least an hour a day for the last 3 months. Before this, I believed that I didn't have issues with anger, only having 2 memories of situations when I felt anger in recent years towards an abusive ex. I recall feeling very angry at my parents when I was younger, but it disappeared in my late adolescent years. But now I feel more and more anger is bubbling up, manifesting itself in intensified irritation at what I perceive as arrogance or condescension. And in particular, in anger whenever I have discussions with my father, who tends to resort to interruptions, aggressiveness, ad hominem attacks, and so on. I'm noticing that in general, I feel a lot of anger towards him. Just the thought of having a close relationship to him makes me feel disgusted. I feel like he sees everyone as inferior and himself as infallible, even though even my mother often criticizes him behind his back. He seems to have no awareness that his daughters do not feel comfortable debating with him, even though we are all passionate individuals. My other 3 sisters no longer express their views because he responds so aggressively. Our relationship with him is broken. At least that is my perception of the situation. So I guess that's the context for my emotions. I'm trying to understand why I feel this way. I've never had issues like this before. Has anyone experienced this or some understanding of it? Should I really be meditating when it is making me angrier than before? It used to be so much easier to control my emotional expression, but now it feels like there is a revolt within me. Thank you so much for all your thoughtful answers. I thought I should clarify that my father has certainly never been abusive, either physically or emotionally. Emotionally distant, yes. Insensitive, yes, but not abusive or narcissistic. What I'm shocked by is the intensity of my emotional reactions more than anything. Hope that provides some useful context. So I love this. So I'm going to comment on it as if I know something. But I'll be the first to say that I could be completely wrong, but I think this is a beautiful example of many different dimensions of knowledge that all get woven together. So as we talk about this, we're going to talk about trauma responses. We're going to talk about meditative theory, and we are going to talk about some elements of spirituality and karma. And then we're going to end up with practical advice. Not that this person is asking for it, but because I feel excited about giving it. About how to deal with someone when you have these kinds of feelings. Okay? So we're going to do kind of like weave it all together, or try to. Maybe it'll work. Okay. So this is a case of someone who feels a lot of anger in meditation that comes bubbling up because they have this dad who apparently was not fun to talk to. So let's start with, why is there suppressed anger, or where is this anger coming from? I'm not an angry person. This is very fascinating, okay? So if you look at traumatic situations, and I know this person didn't say they were abused, but what we sort of know now is that a lot of these situations are traumatic in the sense of trauma with a little t. They shape the way that we live. They don't have to be abusive, but they shape our reactions and stuff like that. So we're going to explore that. So this person used to get angry with their dad because their dad was condescending, not listening. Number one, right? The dad doesn't listen to what other people have to say. He just insists that they're wrong. So when you are a child, you have poorly developed frontal lobes, which means when you feel angry, you act angry, right? A 2-year-old throws a temper tantrum, like they can't control it. What is happening in the brain is what we see in the outside when we're a child. So there's research on this. There's a great paper by Judith Herman, okay? We can maybe even pull it up if y'all want. Shall we pull it up? Let's pull it up. Let's take a quick look. I have to find it now. Oh my God, I've got like 600 papers. Okay, I try, chat. Give me a second. We show this paper because paper is cool. Opening up 18 tabs. Let's go. Not that one. Not that one. Not that one. Ugh. Can I find it? Ah, it's the last one. Beautiful. Okay, now we have to find this, okay? All right. Beautiful paper. This is the paper that coined the term complex PTSD, I think, by Judith Herman. So, let's see anger. Yes. Yes. Okay. Here it is. The humiliated rage of the imprisoned person also adds to the depressive burden. During captivity, the prisoner cannot express anger at the perpetrator. To do so would jeopardize survival. Even after release, the survivor may continue to fear retribution from any expression of anger against the captor. Moreover, the survivor carries a burden of unexpressed anger against all of those who remained indifferent and failed to help. Efforts to control this rage may further exacerbate the survivor's social withdrawal and paralysis of initiative. Occasional outbursts of rage against others may further alienate the survivor and prevent the restoration of relationships. An internalization of rage may result in malignant self-hatred and chronic suicidality. Beautiful. Okay? So, if we look at this situation, let's adapt what this is saying to this case. Okay? Meditation brings up anger. Only having these particular cases of this explosion of anger, right? Towards the dad, towards an abusive ex-boyfriend. I'm not trying to diagnose this person with CPTSD. Okay, so let me explain what we learned. So when we were studying, when Judith Herman came out with that paper in, Jesus, what is it? Let's look. 1992. So 30 years ago, 32 years ago, this paper was published. In those 32 years, we've discovered a couple of things. The first is that Judith Herman was looking at impotent rage for prisoners of war. And what she noticed is that when you are in a controlling environment, rage cannot be expressed. Because anytime you get angry, you get punished for being angry. Okay? Then what happened is over the last 30 years, everyone was like, wow, this stuff happens to prisoners of war. Right? And then we noticed something really weird. That there were people who had complex PTSD who had never been prisoners of war. And that there were people who grew up in abusive childhoods or in abusive homes. They manifested these symptoms. And we were like, okay, so it's not just prisoners of war. It's also abused children. Fair enough. Still bad trauma. And then we started to see that, oh my God, wait, they don't have to have frank abuse. They don't need to be physically abused, emotionally abused, or sexually abused. They just need to have controlling environments, overly controlling environments. They need to have adverse childhood experiences, like divorces and moving around a lot as kids. So over time, over the last 30 years, Judith Herman's characterization started with this, and we've now encompassed it to include up to 60% of the population. This is what we know. And impotent rage is a big part of it. Okay? So what I'm envisioning, and this is based on my clinical experience, right? So I have no idea what happened with this person, but what I've seen time and time and time again is daughters who have trouble with feeling angry. And at some point in their 20s or early 30s will start to get really angry with their dads. And these are dads who are very condescending, very angry with the child, and most importantly, punished the child in adolescence for getting angry. So as the child gets angry, dad will actually be very punishing towards them. And so adolescent girl learns, don't cross dad. And we see this family dynamic, it's textbook, right? Where if you kind of look at this, dad has no awareness that his daughters do not feel comfortable. My other three sisters no longer express their views. This is what signals to me that this is a household thing. This is not a this person thing. Everyone in all the sisters have figured out talking to dad is a waste of time and getting angry is a waste of time. Totally fine, right? Fine in the sense that that's how people adapt to the situation. So impotent rage is harmful. So what do we do with it? Our frontal lobes develop when we're adolescents and we push the rage down. We don't express the rage anymore. We learn that feeling rage is harmful, is dangerous. We're not going to be angry people because being an angry person doesn't get you anything. When you are in a truly emotionally supportive household, when you get angry, your parents won't shut down the anger. They will recognize it as a signal. Something is wrong. This child is not happy for some reason. Let's explore it. Let's try to handle it. And you can correct the angry behavior, right? You can say you can't hit people. What are you upset about? Let's figure out how to address that need. So now what's happened is we have entered the realm of psychological defense mechanisms like sublimation and suppression. So we take all of that anger that we've felt and we push it way down and we wall it off in the mind. And now we enter meditation and understanding what happens in meditation. So, in order to survive in this kind of household, there's a child that has... Oh man, I'm so glad I did this one because I'm so excited. Anger. But this anger is harmful. So it becomes an impotent rage. And then what we do is we take a bottle in our mind and we take this anger and we move it down into the bottle. And then we block it off with our psychological defense mechanisms. Enter the work of Anna Freud, right? Who discovered these things like suppression or even altruism. And it doesn't help other people when I get angry, so I'm going to be the bigger person and I'm not going to feel my anger. We do all of these mental things. So as we do these mental things, so that we can function in the world. Because having this unbridled, unprocessed, suppressed anger that started at the age of 13, okay, when we were 13 years old, we started getting angry and we started pushing it down. Let's say adolescence. And then this works because this allows their family to continue having a relationship with your parents, right? You just got to push it down. Relationship is broken, but they're managing because how do they fix the broken relationship? They just don't talk to their dad. Easy. So of course it's broken, but this is how they maintain harmony through no conversation. Okay? I'm trying to understand why I feel this way. I've never had these issues before. Okay, so now let's talk about meditation. So, in meditation, this is our mind. All right? So what we do in meditation is we start erasing layers of the mind. All right, so what does this look like practically? So if we look at my mind, I have thoughts, I have desires, I have emotions, I have a sense of identity. These are all the things that exist in the mind. So at any given point, the reason I made them this way is because this is usually our perception of them. We don't always perceive our identity, right? We don't walk around thinking, oh, like this is who I am. We walk around just thinking stuff. Like I need to get a glass of water, I need to pick up the mail. And then as I walk out of the house, my eyes see a cookie, and then I'll have a desire. So I experience that desire. And then occasionally, if I'm a human being living in the world, I'll experience some emotion. And then occasionally I'll have a sense of identity. I'm so awesome. I'm such a loser. Oh my God. I'm great. I'm really way better than I used to be. So we'll have all of these experiences. And in meditation, what do? We start by stopping the thoughts, right? So focus your attention on the breath or do a dharana, do trataka, do whatever. We're doing some kind of meditation. And then the thoughts stop. And then what do we do in meditation? We restrain our desires. So a really simple example, I'm sitting in meditation, I'm chanting Om, and I have an itch on my nose. In normal life, the itch on the nose happens, and I scratch it, the itch goes away. The next time the itch comes, I gratify it, it goes away. The next time the itch comes, I gratify it, it goes away. And I result in a mind that when I have a desire, I give into the desire, which doesn't mean that the desire goes away forever. In fact, it enhances the desire. So the more we give into the desire, it grows. Whatever you feed will grow. When you give it what it wants, it grows. So if I get my very fancy coffee or very simple coffee every day at 9 a.m., if I get used to having it that day and I'm gratifying that desire over and over again, if I throw a temper tantrum and everyone caves in and accommodates me, including all 4 of my daughters, then I have no awareness of it. The desire gets fulfilled and the desire keeps going. But in meditation, we learn to control our desires. No scratching your nose. So this layer of the mind disappears. So then what starts to happen is as we break down these layers of the mind, what we're also doing is breaking down our defense mechanisms. We break this. Which means that this stuff comes flooding out. And why is there so much of it? Because karmically, not just karmically, just also psychologically, I'm sort of using this as a karmic way because we're talking about meditation. For 13 years, we've been adding anger to this until the age of 27. We've added a ton of anger down there. And so the pressure builds up. And as I remove things from the layers of my mind, as I remove my psychological defense mechanisms by just allowing my mind to be completely free, then these emotions will come roaring out. Okay? So there are a couple things we're going to talk about now. So the first is that when we are meditating like this, you're not an angry person. If you get a lot of emotions that come out during meditation, this is not your baseline. This is the karmically stored energy, emotional energy that has been implanted within the mind, which just needs to be cleared out. So it's not going to be forever. In fact, over time, it'll decline and then it'll completely go away. So some people will have crying and they'll have this and they'll have that and they'll have catharsis and they'll feel all this kind of like whatever. Like all your pent up emotions will come out when you meditate. Now, so one really interesting example of this. So this is why monks are celibate. So this may sound weird. So when we have sex, it creates such a powerful impression. Orgasm creates such a powerful impression that it sinks deep into our mind. And what happens is you get very advanced in meditation, you will discover that as you get to higher and higher states of meditation, right? So we talked about these layers of mind, but literally, so as you get rid of this one, and even as you get rid of ego, you have to transcend the ego in order to realize this. After you transcend the ego, what you find down here is sex. And what you will find is that the highest states of meditation, there is a sensory impression that gets sensory, psychological, whatever you want to call it. There's such a powerful impression from sexual activity that gets implanted so deep that as you wipe away the top layers of mind, you find a pile of sex at the bottom. So this is also why people will kind of have like, if they're very promiscuous, like I'm not making a moral judgment on that. When I teach people who are very promiscuous meditation, they have a lot of trouble at the advanced stages because what they realize is they've been accumulating all this stuff from all these partners that they weren't aware of. And most people don't realize it because you don't get to that level of mind. You have to transcend everything else to get there. And then you realize how disruptive sex is for meditation. It just keeps you from getting there, right? Which I suspect is also part of the anthropological reason that some of the misogyny started, because these yogis were trying to get enlightenment, but they got laid a couple years ago, and then they hate this person for taking this away from them, and then there's all kinds of problems that arise. But the point is that in meditation, whatever is buried will come out. But it's not at its core. There's always something underneath until you get to unfiltered experience. And so the last thing to consider is more practical. So if you're in this situation, first thing I would say is this is why I think meditation teachers are really good. Like it's fine that you're practicing, but the guidance of a guru is very important to help you navigate through these things. Because you don't know if I'm meditating, I'm feeling worse. Should I keep meditating? Yes. As long as you can handle it, keep meditating. As long as it's not hurting you, but let these emotions come out. They're usually transient. If they're not transient, then you need a psychiatrist or guru or whatever. You need some kind of help. And the last thing is if you're in this situation, as you learn these things and as you let this emotion out, I think this is beautiful because this person is recognizing like, look, what is this life that I have with my family? Right? Like this is the life that I have. This is my dad. This is my relationship. And my dad was not abusive, right? He was emotionally distant and insensitive. And the biggest problem is that dad is, he seems to have no awareness. And so the last thing that I would say is that this is a very beautiful kind of dharmic pull or duty. See, now, if you're in a situation like this, you have the opportunity to improve this situation. Right? And this is something as simple. I'm not saying it's going to work, But this is where like this is what I love about like meditation and family dynamics. As you meditate more and more, you begin to uncover these patterns because you're like, where is this anger coming from? Now you realize this, you talk to your sisters, you realize, oh my God, we all walk on eggshells because this guy has no idea how he's behaving. So now you can open the door to a conversation. Hey, Dad, what is your perception of people's experiences of talking to you? What do you think talking to you is like? Right? And then really slowing things down. So if you noticed that, our three sisters aren't really, like, they don't talk to you about stuff anymore. We have a lot of views. What do you think is the reason that we don't talk to you? Right? And then the dad may get very defensive, may attack you and things like that. And that's when you point out. So I asked you a question of what your perception is and what do you notice about your words? Right? How do you feel right now? Do you feel angry? Do you feel defensive? Do you feel hurt? And just really raising awareness with sitting with this person. And sometimes it's like impossible. I've tried it. Sometimes it's impossible. Some people really need something like MBT, which is mentalization-based therapy. Some people have such a primitive empathic understanding that they cannot understand any of that. They're like really like, and MBT is a useful treatment for narcissism, useful treatment for BPD, can be very helpful. But this is where I think that from a karmic perspective, I would look at this person, I would ask them, do you want this relationship to be like this? Or you have a chance for healing before things get too late? I'm not saying that you have to force it. Your dad has to be a willing participant, but there are ways to approach the situation. And the way to approach any family dynamic is usually by awareness of the dynamic. We're not judging anyone. We're just asking people, hey, have you noticed this? What's your perception when I share an opinion with you? What's your experience of it? So when I said XYZ, how did you react to that? What did you think I was trying to do by sharing that? Because I've noticed that when I share an opinion, you'll usually correct my opinion or offer your own and give reasons why your opinion is superior to mine. Have you noticed that you do that? And then at some point, you can get around to, hey, Dad, I'm curious if you want to try just listening and trying to understand. I know that your mind jumps to this idea of like, this is why we're wrong. Have you ever considered like asking more questions or trying to understand our perspective better? What do you think that would be like? Do you think you'd be capable of it? Are you interested in it? So let's try something. I'm going to say something to you and let's see if you can just try to understand it better. And then I'll ask you what your understanding is and we'll see if it's like consistent with what I was saying or not. And then you can even ask people, hey, what did you hear me say? What is your understanding of what I was telling you? And it's kind of like very slow going, but there's a lot here that can improve because when a dad has been alienated from all four of his daughters, that's a problem in communication. Yeah, so I see a lot of people saying, I wish this would work. No, sometimes they will literally not. What if the father is mentally ill? I can't have this conversation and navigate the backlash. I'm with you, right? So I'm a professionally trained psychiatrist, and I have encountered people for whom this does not work, even though arguably I'm a professional at doing this. And I'm with you. This is not always going to work. But I would say the better you get at it, the more effective it will be. Second thing that I would say is that you would be surprised at how things that are ineffective actually are working. So one of the most humbling experiences I've had as a psychiatrist is that my judge of I am helping this person a lot or I am not helping this person a lot, how wrong I've been. Right? So there are times patients that I've worked with where I'm like, man, I'm the best psychiatrist on the planet. And the patient still has lots of problems. And there are times where I feel like I'm not doing anything for this person. In 6 months from now, somehow they bounce back and they're doing fantastic. So see, one of the biggest mistakes we make in communication is we listen to someone's response as a measure of whether our words are getting through or not. Obviously, right? So if I say something and someone doesn't respond in a negative way, my words aren't getting through. Incorrect. So I'll give you all a simple example, okay? So I recently ran an experiment in this game called Dota 2. And I calibrated my rank in this game based on two different accounts, one where I was talking and one where I was not talking. So the MMR difference is about 800. I don't know how that translates into ranks, but it's like pretty significant, right? It's like a couple of ranks, maybe like one rank, which is it's in the middle of the bell curve, so it's a lot. You're moving from like the 50th or 40th percentile to like 55th percentile or something like that. So it's a 15% increase. And one of the key things that I observed when I was doing this is that oftentimes when I communicate, no one will say anything, but it has an impact. So one really simple, I'm getting very detail oriented here. I'll ask people what character they want me to pick in the draft. And oftentimes no one says anything. But even the fact that I ask them, hey, what do y'all want me to pick, signals to everybody else that I'm willing to be collaborative. I'm willing to be cooperative. I'm trying to improve your game. I'm open to feedback. Transforms the rest of the game, even though they say nothing. The other great example of this is people who foster animals. So when you, probably people too, but humans, when you foster a cat, for example, you can be sending a signal which the cat is ignoring, but it's absolutely having an impact. You just don't see it right away. And if you're a novice at fostering, you'll think the cat dislikes me, the cat will never like me, the cat avoids me at all costs. But if you foster cats, you know what I'm talking about. That a lot of your signals, just because you don't perceive them being received, does not mean that they're not being received. You may not perceive, but it's absolutely being received. And so communication is slow. A lot of people say it doesn't work. It may have some small impact. You just have to give it time. So don't give up. Okay? And the third thing is that sometimes this requires the other person wanting to change. And the biggest problem when people say, I wish this would work, or sometimes they will literally not, is that they don't want to change. And then there's nothing you can do. And that's the problem, right? It's not about capability. It's not about mental illness. My day job is working with people with mental illness. They're capable of so much. The difference is whether they want to change. And so the last thing that I would say, even if you're in a situation where this doesn't work, is give it a shot and don't lose heart. Because if someone doesn't want to change, they won't change. But you will come out of this better. Because even though they don't want to change, you will have practiced this. And one day you will meet someone who will want to change. And when they want to change, you will have the skill set to help them get there and create a healthy relationship. And this will mean the world in your life. Because then what will happen is over time, you will start separating people. Who is willing to play ball? Who is willing to communicate? Who is willing to change what they're doing, change their strategy, and who is not willing to? And depending on who you end up with, right? So then you will start to recognize, you will start to recognize the difference between these two kinds of people. And then you will naturally gravitate towards the people who are willing to hear you. And after you do that for a few years, your entire friend circle will be different. Assuming you socialize and stuff like that, right? Assuming loneliness is not holding you back. You'll start filtering people out of your lives, people who are unwilling to meet you halfway. And you can maintain a relationship. There can still be harmony with your dad. You visit for Christmas and things like that. The anger won't be there, but you'll sort of recognize that, hey, like this is what I can do. And then you can even go one level later. So after 2 years of talking to your dad a little bit, you can say, hey, Dad, it really hurts me that, I've tried talking to you a little bit, but it seems that you're unwilling that you don't want to improve your communication style. You don't seem to value our experience of communicating with you. That makes me sad. And you'd be surprised. I know that there's some tough nuts to crack out there. And believe me, I've met uncrackable nuts. But there are advanced techniques that can be used, right? Waiting a year or two and then saying like, it hurts me that you don't seem to take this seriously, right? And this means that I won't be able to communicate with you. My experience is that I spend less and less time. I don't want to spend time with you. I consider it almost a waste of time, because when I speak, you don't seem to care to listen. And that can be hurtful, right? And then like the parent can get, but you're not angry. You're just sharing feedback with them, and they can explode. And then you can turn to them and you can say, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I was sharing with you that something is hard for me. And your response is to not hear it at all. Just get angry and you start yelling and you start telling me I'm wrong. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Do you see what's happening in this conversation? And then oftentimes what you'll get is, what do you want me to do? Listen. All right? So look, I get that there are uncrackable nuts out there, but what I'm proud of is that this is a community, hopefully, where that's changing. And I know that a lot of people will post things that can feel toxic or whatever, and like people get upset because their post gets banned or whatever, or people will get upset and start yelling about double standards if somebody else's post doesn't get banned. So be careful about your egotistical reactions to stuff, right? And I mean, I'll be the first to say I have yet to meet a team of moderators who have discovered the perfect rule set along with perfect enforcement. I have yet to see it. So the moderators are humans too. They're flawed. They do their best with a good intention in here. Maybe sometimes they power trip. I have no idea. Generally speaking, I don't think our mods do that. There are other corners of the internet where mods will power trip. That'll be their whole shtick. Mods, DMs, take your pick. Thankfully, our mods are like stellar. And they do all this shit themselves, right? So when they show up on the subreddit, they do their best to create an environment that's good for everybody. Okay. All right, y'all. Well, we are, I think we're done for the day. That's everything we've got. And so we'll see y'all next time. I think, yeah. So take care, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. And we'll catch y'all I think maybe Wednesday, Friday. I don't remember exactly. But